that nature.
18 days of voting in Washington are now done.
The polls just closed, and here come the results.
Our mail sorting machines can capture up to 18,000 images an hour.
Washington voters selecting their first new governor in 12 years.
I have a clear record as Attorney General and standing up for consumers, taking on violent crime. So our campaign's about that message.
Getting our message out and people understanding that we need change.
We're tracking all the action up and down the ballot, from the statewide races to the congressional seats up for grabs.
Another huge priority for me is getting rid of this crazy inflation that's destroying working families.
When I'm at the doors over and over, the top 8 out of 40 issues are always economic issues.
Voters across the state deciding a handful of hot-button ballot measures that could reshape Washington's future.
Initiative 2117 is a deceptive initiative that would mean more pollution.
Cap and trade is probably the most regressive tax you could put on the economy.
It's election night 2024, and the Fox 13 team is standing by to bring you complete coverage.
This is your vote, your voice, and it's time to find out what you decide.
So good evening. I'm David Rose.
And I'm Hannah Kim. Thank you so much for joining us on election night. You decide 2024 coverage right out of the gate at 8. The AP is calling 2 races. Washington's vote is going to Vice President Kamala Harris.
No surprise there. The AP also calling the U.S. Senate race in Washington for incumbent Maria Cantwell.
So here's a live look from the Democratic and Republican watch parties right now.
Yeah, we've got one watch party in Bellevue. That's the Republicans. The Democratic watch party is in Seattle. We've got our reporters there. We'll go to them momentarily. But first, we're joined all night by our Fox 13 political analyst. We have Republican Randy Peffel. Randy, thanks for being here. And tonight, we've got Democratic spokesperson, I should say, or former Senator Reuben Carlisle. So, Reuben, thanks for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let's turn to Fox 13's Lauren Donovan live at the Democratic Watch Party in Seattle for us right now. Lauren, what's it like over there?
All right, well, Hannah, compared to when you all saw me 2 hours ago, this place was so sleepy, but now the crowd has filled in DNC, Democrat headquarters, here. The drinks are flowing, vibes are high, and people are wearing a whole lot of blue. People are cheering because Iowa is inching towards the blue, and you're going to see a lot of blue in this mix. Light up cowboy hats, blue hair, tutus, pride flags, cowboy hats similar to what you saw back at the DNC a couple weeks ago. I've yet to find Attorney General and gubernatorial candidate Bob Ferguson here in the mix. However, I did track down another high-profile Democrat, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, an incumbent vying to return to Washington to represent Seattle and the 7th Congressional District, and she told me vibes are high.
I want to make sure we win the initiatives, or defeat the initiatives, I should say, the 4 initiatives. I also am watching Dave Upthegrove for Lands Commissioner. I think that's going to be a close race. I feel really good about Bob Ferguson being our next governor, Nick Brown being our next Attorney General. I think obviously Senator Cantwell is going to go back to the Senate, and obviously I'm going to win. I hope I'm going to win. But I feel good about the state. I feel like we're going to really have a positive result here in the state.
And you may remember, for context, Jayapal was elected to the office back in 2020. So here we are 4 years later, and zooming out to her reaction to potential folks she may be working with in the other Washington. She is hopeful that the House will go blue. As for the presidency, she thinks women are going to show up and choose Kamala Harris. She's really encouraged about what she's seeing so far out of swing states. So plenty more candidates here. We'll keep you in the loop as to when Bob Ferguson shows up. We'll send it back to the studio now. Anna?
All right, Lauren, thank you very much. Let's check in now with the Republican Watch Party in Bellevue, and that's where we find Fox 13's Frankie Thompson. So, Frankie, read the room for us. What's it like there tonight?
Well, first of all, David, it is very loud here at the Hyatt in Bellevue. All of these GOP supporters and voters, they're very excited about the results that are coming out of the East Coast right now for the presidential election. Those states somewhat showing favor for Donald Trump winning the presidency. Of course, those numbers are still very early, just like the numbers that are coming in for Washington now that the polls are closed. People are here in support of Dave Reichert, the Republican candidate for governor. They're showing up here, though, in their red. We've got a ton of MAGA hats here, a lot of red. I saw a life-size inflatable Donald Trump walking around the room somewhere. People are very energized about the results that are coming in right now. I got a chance to speak with the chair of the King County Republican Party. He says we should be surprised and excited to see the results that are coming out locally and nationally. He thinks the GOP has a great opportunity ahead of them as the numbers keep crawling in to see a shift in politics. We haven't seen Dave Reichert in the room right now, but the chair of the King County Party, the chair of the King County Republican Party says he is noticing a very stark difference in the approval rating between Bob Ferguson and Reichert. Let's listen to what that chairman had to say.
One thing is to talk about the Democrat candidate. Bob Ferguson's been in politics for 30 years, but only has an approval rating around 42 to 43%. That's very low. You look at some of the, Cantwell had like a 60% number for her. So it's very telling. And then Dave Reichert, law enforcement and crime is a big issue in Seattle and in King County and Washington State. Even, I was just talking about in the Chinatown International District, they were only voting 12% Republican. They're voting 41% Republican now. They're fed up with the crime, they're fed up with the fentanyl, they're fed up with the homeless problem. So Dave Reichert being a law enforcement candidate, I think that's something that's going to bode well for him. That I guess we'll find out in a little bit.
Yeah, and we just heard from the chair of the King County Republican Party. That was Matthew Patrick Thomas. He says with Dave Reichert being such a huge advocate for public safety, he thinks that is going to win over voters. Of course, we will see those numbers as it comes in. It's very loud in here, so you can tell that the energy is very high here at the Bellevue Hyatt. We also know that Let's Go Washington, 4 of those measures are on the ballot tonight. The GOP party thinks those will have a good chance in Washington as well. They think voters are going to vote for those and support those, but again, those numbers still very early. We're going to send it back to you as we can mingle throughout the room a little bit more, wait for Dave Reichert to show up, learn how people are feeling as we head into the rest of this election night here in Washington. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Frankie, thank you so much. And as you just heard, Frankie saying that there is a lot of, good vibes there right now. Obviously, we're waiting for results to come down, and we should know in a few minutes in some of these big races. And she was at the Reichert camp, and I want to start off with our political analysts and joining them into this conversation. Randy, I want to start with you because Frankie was just at the GOP watch party. How are you feeling right now?
Well, I mean, I think they have to be enthusiastic at the start of the evening, but going into the evening, the polls have not looked strong for the top of the Republican ticket in the state, and there has not been any of the underlying dynamics in the last couple days that would change that perception. So while crime is a huge issue in this race, the Attorney General seems to have muddied the waters enough so that voters are not understanding the difference between those two candidates on that issue.
So we're expecting 80% of the vote, Ruben, to come in, but at this point through today, only 57% of the votes had been submitted. So pretty late voting coming in. Why do you think it's late, and do you see any surprises in this election?
You know, the Secretary of State is still predicting about 80+% turnout, and we're used to it in Washington. You know, we're an all-mail ballot state, and we know the reality that it trickles in over the course of a week, and we might see a 10% swing by the time that first drop comes in the next 15, 20 minutes or so, and a week out. So that's the reality. So overall, we still expect a large turnout. I think there's a challenge with that because we're just so used to instant gratification, and we're probably not going to get it.
Yeah, we get our first votes coming in here about 8:15 or 8:20. We'll start to see some of the local results from the ballots that have been counted so far.
Yeah, so let's check in now with Fox 13's Matthew Smith in Studio B for us, tracking the presidential race and balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Matthew.
Yeah, obviously these are things that nationally people are wringing their hands over at this point in time. Right now, our balance of power when it comes to the Electoral College numbers, we have Donald Trump at 214, Kamala Harris at 179, and we want to take a closer look at some of these battleground states. So North Carolina is a big one because at this point in time, we already have 88% of the vote in, and it is breaking in Donald Trump's direction, 50.8% to 48.1. So I know it's kind of hard to see all this on the map, but what I want to break this down by is uncounted votes to give you an idea of why this one has not been called by the AP yet. So you see all these little shaded spots, and I can click on them, kind of run you through them so you get a better idea. But with 14% of the vote still out, Kamala Harris is pulling in about 2-to-1 in Wake County. That is where you're waiting for votes to come in. Now, we also have other states that we can take a closer look at as well. One of them is Pennsylvania. We know a lot of people want to figure out what's going to happen there. This one, we only have 71% of the votes counted. And as we take a closer look, we have 51% coming in for Donald Trump, 47% for Kamala Harris. Again, the place where we haven't seen a lot of those numbers yet has been in those more urban areas where we'll have to wait to see some of those come in. I also want to take a closer look at these balance of power numbers when we get to the Senate. That is where we get really, really interesting, because we have a count. We're trying to see which side can get to 50. Republicans don't appear to be losing much ground when it comes to the U.S. Senate, with the exception of one race right now in Nebraska. Now, this one is also too close to call, but with 57% of the vote counted, the biggest surprise that we're seeing so far, Independent Dan Osborne is winning. And again, we can go back to these uncounted for votes and try to figure out what's still to come. And this is a little bit of a different story than when we talk about the presidential election. Here, we still have a lot of rural counties in Nebraska coming in. Will Nebraska cede one of the Republican seats? Could that change the state of play in the Senate? We'll have to wait and see. But Democrats have a lot of uphill work with their other races in that regard. Hannah?
Yeah, those are some close margins, Matthew. Thank you so much. And another tight race that we are expecting is in Washington's District 3. Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez is the incumbent in that one. Her challenger, Republican Joe Kent, in what many call a swing district.
A lot of money put into this race. Fox 13's A.J. Janaville joining us live in Clark County tonight. So, A.J., going to be a tight race there? What are you hearing at this hour?
Well, David, if you look back historically 2 years ago when these two went head-to-head in 2022, that race was so close. It was less than a percentage point that put Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in that winning position. Now, we are just about 3 hours south of Seattle here in Clark County. Right now, we're at Joe Kent's party. The reason that we're here, why this race is so important, is because this could have an impact on the U.S. House. You have these two people that could lead to what that majority is in the House. There are several races that are going on right now throughout the country that could sway the power balance. So that's why this is such a big focus for our state as well as the entire country. Now, why this race is so close, you have these two essentially newcomers both stepping into this role back in 2022. Gluesenkamp-Perez has been the incumbent since 2022, serving in that role for the last 2 years. But back and forth, the two have been battling. When they met last year, Joe Kent had actually beaten the incumbent, beaten that Republican incumbent to go up against Gluesenkamp-Perez. This district historically recently has been a red district. They voted for Trump back in 2020 as well as 2016, yet that Democrat was able to take that role 2 years ago. I got a chance to speak to Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez about essentially stepping into the ring for a rematch against Kent 2 years later.
He is the same person that I ran against 2 years ago, maybe more time online since then, but my values haven't changed, and it's really, it's good to like have this voting record and say, look, I wasn't kidding about who I am. What I said I was going to do is what I did.
I think they have us on TV. That's why it's gotten so loud. It's been rowdy. There's probably more than 100 people here at the Joe Kent party, but maybe 25, 30 minutes ago, they told the crowd that Kent was not going to be here tonight. That's because at the elections, earlier in the day, we were there. There are hundreds of people standing in line. Officials here said that Joe Kent is talking to those voters. That's why he's not here. So it will be interesting to see if he does show up here at his own party tonight. One thing that's also very interesting about this area, Clark County specifically, Vancouver, 2 times last month, there was someone that went after a ballot box. In one of those incidents last week, they were able to destroy one of the ballot box drop-off points, damaging or destroying about 500 100 ballots. When you consider that 2 years ago, this race came down to just a few thousand votes, that's something to really consider. We were at the election headquarters earlier. We were able to speak to people. Again, hundreds of people in line. A lot of those folks saying they came out in person to stand against that attack that happened on that ballot box, but also make sure that their voice is heard. We'll be here throughout the night. We're still waiting on those results. Guys, I'll send it back to you.
All right, AJ, thank you very much. And now we have the first results coming in the race for governor.
Yeah, so you see on the screen right there, Dave Reicher, the Republican, at 53% at this moment, Bob Ferguson at 47%. But these are very preliminary numbers because remember, the vast majority of the votes have not been counted yet. So we're going to just sit on this one. We don't really know exactly how this is going to pan out yet.
Yeah, there's only 15% of the votes counted. And traditionally, conservative voters vote early, more liberal voters vote late. But where are these votes coming in from that have already been counted?
Well, I mean, right now you're just getting the county level votes that are coming in, and you're seeing most of this coming out of eastern Washington. You're not seeing any of the top 10 counties except Whatcom County included in this first batch of, and so in 20 minutes you'll have a much clearer picture, I think, of where the state's going. But again, remember, only half of the votes, if half, will even be counted tonight. The remainder will be counted in the coming days.
So, Reuven, are you feeling any way differently from Randy?
No, I think his assessment of the turnout is exactly right. Tomorrow's ballot dump at about 4 o'clock is a really big one because so many people put those ballots in the ballot box and in the mail on Saturday, during the weekend, and on Monday. So he's absolutely spot on. But those smaller counties is also sort of an indication around the country that a lot of those smaller counties come in early frequently. So we see this pattern around the country and in Washington.
All right, Reuven, thanks very much. All right, we've got a lot of initiatives to talk about as well. I know, Reuven, one of these is very close to your heart since you authored one of the bills, the laws that's being challenged now. But we're going to go out to Shira Matsuzawa. She's in Kirkland to talk about the initiatives. There were 4 that people voted on. So, Shira, take us through what you've learned tonight.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in just a moment. You can see right now Brian Haywood, founder of Let's Go Washington, is talking. I'm actually going to step out of the way because it's quite the setup here. It's quite the production here. You can see these large screens there. And earlier, they were showing every angle of this election, from the local to national media. But right now, you can see the different initiatives, the ones that have passed and the ones that are still waiting to pass. But as we talked about earlier, Brian Haywood, he really spearheaded getting these initiatives on the ballot. And we caught up with him earlier and asked what it would feel like if all 4 were passed. Take a listen.
Both, okay, yeah, that's what it should be, as well as, yes! I don't know how to describe it. This was 1.3 million people who signed an initiative, and there's a lot of people that we talked to who felt sort of frustrated that the legislature wouldn't listen to them. They had voted against most of these laws that had been passed already in previous years, and so to get all 4 of these passed would be a real victory for people pushing back against Olympia.
Stop the backdoor. And here's a look at those initiatives. I-2109 would repeal the state's capital gains tax, which would bring in as much as $2 billion. Now, this does not apply to real estate or retirement savings. Supporters say this tax punishes the wealthy and opens the doors for taxes that would trickle down. Opponents say this isn't a punishment, but rather an investment, and if passed, this would decrease education funding. Initiative 2117 would repeal the state's Climate Commitment Act. Supporters say this is leading to higher gas prices and makes energy prices too high, while opponents say this takes away support from climate-based programs. Initiative 2124 allows people to opt out of the state's long-term health care program. Supporters say this initiative would give more people more control. Opponents say this program would collapse if this initiative is passed. And last but not least, Initiative 2066 is about regulating energy services and ensures access to natural gas. It would require utility companies and local governments to provide natural gas to eligible customers. Haywood says the legislature wants to get rid of natural gas use as well as fossil fuel. Opponents say this initiative robs utilities of resources and that there isn't an actual ban on natural gas in the current law. Now, of course, voting yes right now, if you voted yes, the polls are closed, but if you voted yes, the initiative would essentially repeal the legislation. If vote no, would keep the current legislation and policies as is. But again, we are monitoring those results, and as they trickle in, we'll be sure to update you. But I will send it back now to you in the meantime.
All right, Shira, thank you so much. And here are the numbers so far that we've just received on Congressional District 3. We were just talking about this with AJ, giving us the breakdown of this race. So this is southwestern Washington. You see Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. She is the incumbent. She's sitting at 52%. Joe Kent, her challenger, at 48%. But one thing to note here is that it does not appear that Clark County numbers are in yet, and that is a big portion of the votes there. So really, David, this one also too early to call.
Well, I know Randy feels strongly about this, and so we're not going to know for a while then. It could come down to it just like last time. I mean, how long did it take before it was certified last time?
Well, last time it came down to the last 2,700 votes to decide this, and it was a week and a half in. And I think that's going to be the same situation right now with this race. It's 50-50 according to every poll, every analyst that you've seen come out. The campaigns have certainly campaigned like they think it's 50-50. And so I would be very surprised with half of the vote counted tonight that we'll have anything definitive.
And Ruben, how important is this race nationally to the balance of power?
That's right. It is absolutely front and center in every way critical to control of the U.S. House of Representatives. But I also have to tell you that it's also representative of something incredible. She's just an incredible member of Congress. No one expected her to win in 2020. It was a complete shocker. And now it's on the absolute front page of every political newspaper in the country and every TV station there is. People really are curious about this because it's representative of President Trump and his approach to the Republican Party because of Joe Kent and the type of support and approach that he takes politically. And Representative Gluesenkamp-Perez is just a real deal blue-collar person who just shows up with authenticity. So it's just an incredibly stark difference.
All right, we'll see what happens when the rest of the numbers come in.
All right, so we'll be right back after a quick break. All right, welcome back in. So we have a lot to talk about. We saw some numbers come in the top of the 8 o'clock. We said that the AP called, the race for Cantwell and Kamala Harris, which is not a surprise, but also we saw some numbers trickle in for the governor's race here, which is a huge one. But it looks as though still most of those votes, they need to be counted. So we really just don't have anything definitive, which is not a surprise. Our political analysts have been saying that this whole time. When do you think that we're going to be able to see some real results here?
Well, the reality is AP calls a race based on polling and ballot returns. That's why they were willing to call the races for the federal races at 8 o'clock before they had any ballot returns, because they had polling and exit polling that said this is how the race is going to go. They do not have that same level of confidence for state races or races that get within 10 points, 8 points on election night. And so you're not going to see calls on those until Friday at the earliest.
Ruben, I know you were looking online at Fox13.com, Fox13Seattle.com, and some other websites, looking at some of the numbers that are starting to populate from over in Eastern Washington on the initiatives. Any surprises you're seeing there?
Yeah, a little bit. It's interesting. You know, small percentage, about 28% in on some of these, in a lot of those Eastern Washington counties. But the fact is that a number of the initiatives are, in fact, losing in that first batch. And that's a real indication of a real heavy lift for them to get a yes vote statewide as you think about the millions coming in. So I think it's a pretty surprising numbers, even though the initial numbers are so small in terms of the actual aggregate count.
Sure.
The percentage is a pretty strong no, overwhelmingly, except the one, that 2066, which is that natural gas. That seems to be in a stronger position.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll come back and circle around
Long
with
way
you.
to go.
Yeah, long way to go. We'll definitely talk about that. But let's now turn to, I believe we're going to Alejandra Guzman, and you are tracking the Attorney General's race, I hear. What's the latest on that one, Allie?
I do, Hannah, but before I want to get to those early voting results, I actually want to show you a little bit about the room. This is what it looks like right now. It's a completely packed house. It's getting louder. Folks are standing around, actually keeping a close eye on those televisions, refreshing their phones as quickly as they possibly can, because those results are coming in hot. I mean, take a listen to this. We've got Nick Brown up for Attorney General. His latest results show 50.2. He's running against Republican Pete Serrano, who's showing 49.8. Now, Nick Brown is here with his family, with his kids, parents, a lot of loved ones, but the one thing he tells me that he isn't doing is actually keeping a close eye on that television. He's here to just soak in every single energy that is here. I mean, take a look around the room. I mean, you can just keep hearing that cheering, getting louder and louder as we're starting to see some of those national results around the room. I mean, this is quite the vibe here. You can kind of hear how everyone is so excited. Let's take a look at what's actually going on here. And I mean, it's been a long road. After 15 months, Nick is actually amped up. He says one thing he's doing is that he does want to interact with those supporters. I actually got a glimpse of that, and the one thing that they kept saying is that they're very confident in him. While he's not declaring victory, his priority is keeping Washingtonians safe. Should he win, I asked what his first 100 days would look like. Take a listen.
The first 100 days will be about building a good team to make sure that Washington is prepared for whatever challenges that we face. So whether that's from a change in administration in D.C. or new challenges here, we're going to make sure that we build and develop the best law firm possible for the people of the state of Washington.
Now, some of his concerns, of course, include public safety. We've talked about this many times. We know how he actually stands on teen violence and that juvenile detention system. But he's also determined to protect health care and, of course, abortion or access to abortions. He's got to catch up and get up to speed on the cases that the Attorney General's office has actually taken up on this last year and a half. One of those big cases that we've been closely following here on Fox 13 is that Kroger and Albertsons merger that we know could impact a lot of people, not just the workers, but as we know, they're one of the largest employers of unions. So he says he's ready for that task. He welcomes this new role should he win. But at the end of the night, the one thing that he did want to stress to voters tonight is just thanking everyone for doing their civic duty, and especially those who did support him throughout his campaign. But there's lots to get to, especially here at the state level. I also chatted with Dave Up the Grove, who, as we know, has been the man of the hour, sweating as we saw during the primaries. He was neck and neck with everything going on in that race. But I won't spoil it for you. We're going to catch up and hear what he has to say coming up in the next few minutes. Back to you guys.
All right, Allie, thank you so much. We'll see you then. Going back to the governor's race here, so far, 57% estimated votes counted there at the top of your screen. Bob Ferguson leading Dave Reichert 57% to 43%, so a considerable change from the earlier numbers that we had. This should not change again tonight. The next time we'll hear new numbers is tomorrow, but a considerable lead for Bob Ferguson over Dave Reichert there. Let's move on to Lands Commissioner now.
Yeah, so you got Dave Up the Grove 54% to Jamie Herrera Butler at 46% of the vote. And this one was really heavily talked about. I mean, pretty contentious one here. So the Republicans were hoping that Jamie Herrera Butler would be able to win this one 54 to 46. I mean, he has quite a margin so far, but obviously we're going to wait to see when the results come out more tomorrow, and we'll talk about this one a little bit more.
And for the Office of the Superintendent of Education, Chris Ringdahl, the incumbent, leading handily over David Olson, 55% to 45%. Half of the votes reporting have been counted so far. So let's bring in our analysts here, and let's talk about this. When you talk about Jamie Herrera Butler, Randy, that is a pretty considerable lead to overcome. In the history, when we've been talking politics, you always told me that if you're separated by 8% on the first night, that's a long way to try to overcome that.
8 to 10% is really a demarcation point in Washington State, because about half the vote gets counted on election night, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. But statistically, to then go from being up 10 to then losing by 10 on the remaining votes, statistically, that's improbable. It can happen. It's improbable. But we're still missing some key components tonight. We don't have all the vote even in tonight. Snohomish County isn't in. Clark County isn't in. Huge counties, Yakima, another top 10 county isn't in. Until they get in, we won't have a clear picture. But I think you are seeing that the Democrat financial advantage in this campaign is coming to bear, because the similar statewide results. You're seeing all the candidates in those mid-50s on the Democrat side. On the Republican side, it's in the mid-40s. And so you're not seeing a lot of breakthrough. I think that's the finances coming through.
Okay. And Snohomish County does have the third highest number of votes in the state.
And Reuven, is there anything that you see out of that surprises you? I mean, specifically the Lands Commissioner. I know you were following that pretty closely.
Yeah, I think the pattern is exactly right. You're seeing those mid-40s for the Republicans, up mid-50s up to about 58. Bob Ferguson's at that range as well. So they're all sort of in that same range. I think money is a factor. I also think some of the national issues. I mean, I think the issue of Roe v. Wade being overturned, the issue of a higher percentage of women turnout is a factor. I mean, there's a number of those national issues that are real, and they play out in Washington as well. So I think it seems to be on track to be a pretty strong night at the state level initially. But again, Randy's right, of course, that we don't have the big counties in. At the same time, some of those national patterns are going to probably play out here as well.
Well, we have some breaking news right now. The Associated Press is calling the election for governor for Bob Ferguson. So the Associated Press saying that Bob Ferguson has won the race with 56% of the vote so far.
We were just talking about that, how saying that there's some of these counties that were still uncounted. But
and a couple more have come in. Clark just came in. I mean, we're still sitting. Snohomish is the last big county out. Yakima is also out. But as those counties come in, AP can then compare that to their exit polling, and you're not going to overcome a 14-point difference. I mean, Dave Reichert deserved better than this. I think he was a very compelling candidate in this election year, but he just did not have the resources to compete.
Well, it'll be interesting to see in the end how King County went, because King County is crucial with the largest number of votes. We'll see. He's former King County sheriff. We'll see how that shook out. But Associated Press is saying Bob Ferguson is Washington's next governor. Now, the initiatives are always something you had to research when you sat down with your ballot to make sure that you voted the way you wanted to, and there was a lot of confusion over those, but we have some early results right now.
Yeah, so let's take a look right now. This is 2066, and it's saying yes at 51% and no at 49%. So, you know, a little background on this one. This is kind of the 11th hour this happened. You had Brian Haywood, who's with the group Let's Go Washington, and he's behind this initiative as well. He's behind all four of them. But the reason why this one came last minute is because during the legislative session, you had a very controversial vote, and it passed at a very slim margin. It would have allowed Puget Sound Energy to speed up, to electrify, the grid for their customers. And you had Brian Haywood's side basically saying, hey, look, that means that this might mean that we're going to not have natural gas, that homeowners and businesses might not be able to get that. So in order to, to make sure that natural gas doesn't go away, Brian Haywood came up with this initiative, 2066. So that's a little bit of the background on this.
That's still really close. I mean, we heard from restaurant owners who were really worried the state was going to try to take away, their gas grills. So this will be interesting to see what happens. Let's look at the other initiatives. We got the capital gains tax, and right now, 64% to 36%. I think this one kind of came as a surprise. Ruben, you and I were talking about this one. Why do you think the numbers came down like this?
Well, keep in mind that the no vote is a vote to maintain the capital gains tax. So it has an exemption of $262,000 a year. Stocks and bonds are in effect what they're taxing, profits above that $262,000. So a no vote maintains that as a policy for the state of Washington. A yes vote would have overturned that. So it is interesting, again, given that most of these votes are from Eastern Washington, smaller rural counties, to have such an overwhelming strong vote in terms of that no position. So I think, look, it's representative. We have a history as a state of a pretty active sense of energy and passion about the issue of taxes. We all know that. And there have been a number of initiatives over the years that have dealt with that issue, from Tim Eyman and more. So I think that it would be interesting to see the numbers be so lopsided in this one. I think that's unusual.
Yep, let's try to go to the long-term care insurance one, or Washington Cares. So here we go. This is the 2117, so I take that back. Let's talk about this one first.
Yeah, you might want to explain this one a little bit.
I mean, there is this one. This is trying to repeal a portion of the Climate Commitment Act. And look, this was kind of the baby of Governor Inslee, and we also have right here on our panel Reuven Carlisle, who co-wrote the Climate Commitment Act. So when David Rose said this earlier, that, hey, Reuven, you have this personal stake in this initiative, and that's why. And so one of the things that people get confused about is, hey, Brian Haywood's side is saying they believe that the Climate Commitment Act directly caused gas prices to go up. Your side is saying, no, that's not true. So we've been arguing back and forth on this. I'm going to give you a chance, Reuven, to explain yourself.
Sure. Well, the Climate Commitment Act is a cap on emissions. And what it does is it declines between now and 2050. So it basically allows those large emitters, 110 large manufacturing facilities, to decarbonize in a smart way. It's a marketplace. And it's sort of a moderate marketplace, and the concept is invented by President George W. Bush, and a number of other Republican economists over the years have come up with this idea of a cap and trade in California, cap and invest here in Washington. So it's a climate policy that caps emissions and then reduces it. It does require those emitters, those polluters, to purchase allowances, and then the money is reinvested in the community, mostly along the lines of new ferries, along the lines of free transit for young people in the state of Washington, can hop on any bus, any train, any ferry, free of charge. And it also pays for salmon restoration. So the investments in the community are really valuable. So this is proving to be a very popular program in California and Quebec and really around the world. So
you had a big smile on your face. You weren't on camera when the numbers came up, but you were pleased to see those numbers, I know.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about long-term care insurance. This is one where you're all paying a percentage of your salary, goes right into this fund, and then someday in the future, 10 years in the future, if you need it for long-term care, you can get up to $36,500.
Yeah, so it depends on how much you put into it, but yeah, $36,500, and you had both sides basically saying, look, we need money for people who need it towards the end of their life, and the other side is saying we should not have to be taxed automatically on our paycheck, because right now what this does, long-term care program or Washington Cares Fund, what it does is it taxes 0.58% of every $100 you earn, right? So it just all depends on how much you make. But if you think about the vote right now, take a look. No side, 56%, and the yes side getting 44%.
So it's not going anywhere.
I mean, so Randy, what do you think about this?
I think the Service Employees International Union made a very good investment to reward their employees and generate more union dues with this very lousy law that they pushed through with the help of a Democrat-only vote in the legislature. And this bill does not allow people who move out of the state to be covered. It doesn't allow people who pay in less than 10 years to be covered. And at the end of the day, you're getting a benefit that is largely going to union dues, frankly. I mean, this is a lousy law. However, it shows that if you have no spending for a campaign once it gets to advertising time to tell the voters what it's about, that the other side can run ads and say, oh, this is confusing, this will take away things. And it was completely false. It was a campaign that was built on lies, and they're very, very successful tonight.
All right, Randy is not happy, but we have a lot more to talk about. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to our You Decide 2024 election coverage tonight. The Associated Press now calling the election for Bob Ferguson, saying Bob Ferguson will be the next governor of Washington State.
Yeah, so we know that where Lauren Donovan is at, I know that there's going to be very lots of happy people out there. So let's go to Lauren Donovan. She is at the Democrat Watch Party. Lauren, so what's going on there right now?
Hannah, I'm sure you can hear how excited people are. We have an answer as to who our 23rd governor will be, and right here behind
Senate, we do have a new live pick right up now in Pennsylvania of this in terms of a watch party for Dave McCormick, the Republican in that state. And I do want to put up just this, a post of what's coming up in terms of this race in Pennsylvania over incumbent Bob Casey. It is a very tight margin, but a 2-point lead right now at this point for Dave McCormick. The AP has not called it yet, but it is getting closer to the finish line. 80% of the votes have been counted at this point, 2.7 million to 2.6 million in terms of that. All right, we're following all the latest here on this live now from Fox. Let's line away for another quick.
There's a lot of votes
votes left to be counted, and we are going to work our heart out. I know that the Harris campaign is going to make sure every vote is counted too. And let's all remember 4 years ago, it took a while. Patience, patience. But here in Washington State, we're seeing the results already, and you're about to hear from some great Democrats who've won statewide. I am so proud of all of them and look forward to working with them. And I will tell you this, we know what our values are, and I promise you this, I will always fight for our values in Washington, D.C. as your United States Senator. Every single thing you fought for in this election, I will be your voice and continue to be that voice in Washington, D.C., and I'm proud to do so. Now, I am very excited that the voters in Washington State have put their voice out to support a great friend of mine who I am going to introduce here in just a second. But I will just say, one of the things that I love is that here in Washington State, I have young girls that come up to me and say, can men be senators? And tonight, Washington State said, we are electing a woman senator here in Washington State. She is a great partner, my friend. We work so hard together. Please welcome Senator Maria Cantwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Washington voters. Thank you all so much. It is a great honor to represent the state of Washington in the United States Senate. And it is a great honor to take the values of people in this state to get things done, to work across the aisle, to protect a woman's right to choose, to protect our environment, to grow economic opportunity, to lower costs and increase wages. And I guarantee you this campaign was about growing the middle class in the United States of America, led by our state that has had some of the highest wage growth in the country. Now we're going to go back there and work across the aisle to get more done, to show the rest of the country that we can make progress. I want to thank my campaign staff, my campaign manager, Griffin Clay, Casey Duff, Jill McNerney. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. I want to thank my family and friends behind me who supported this effort all the way, to make a point loud and clear that these values are worth fighting for and that the success of our state can be contributing to the rest of the nation. I also want to thank all the people who worked on this campaign across the state, from Spokane to Vancouver to Bellingham down to Cowlitz County. We have worked so hard to make this the message of opportunity and to elect President Harris so she too can grow the middle class in the United States of America. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Washington voters. I promise to keep fighting for us and to keep working across the aisle to accomplish what our nation needs. Thank you all very much.
All right, so we're going to dip out of that right now. We will go back when Bob Ferguson comes up to speak and to accept that he's the next governor of Washington State. We also want to remind you that at the bottom of your screen along there, you've got a lot of election results. I know there's many of the results in your community you want to get to. We're going to get to all those tonight on the air, but you can also see them there and on Fox13Seattle.com.
Yeah, now let's turn to Fox 13's Matthew Smith checking in on the presidential race as well as a big congressional race.
Yeah, and we've seen a big call when it comes to that presidential race. When it comes to North Carolina, we were talking earlier. At this point, Donald Trump has 230 electoral points to Kamala Harris's 205. And North Carolina was one of the ones we were just talking about with the breakdown earlier. Would she have enough of these uncounted votes left to come back ahead, but at this point, the AP just doesn't see the numbers there. You see the large population centers, they're shrinking, the votes have come in. Donald Trump's still holding that lead with 50.8% of the vote. So again, that is going to change the direction of what the paths of victory are. Kamala Harris is really starting to narrow down, so it's looking like the more and more likely that you could see multiple paths of victory for Donald Trump at this point in time. We also want to talk about here locally, District 3, and we saw AJ down at that rally earlier tonight. This gives you a good idea of what's happening with Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Joe Kent. So currently, with 71% of the ballots counted, we have Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez 52%, to Kent's 48%. And again, we always like to break these down and look to see where the at-large ballots are, who hasn't turned them in. So I pulled up the 3 spots that you're going to be looking at moving forward. The biggest spot where we haven't seen a large number to come in just yet is Clark County. This is the part where when you saw Clark County come in a little bit later earlier in the night, it flipped it from Kent to Gluesenkamp-Perez. This is where the most bids are, or ballots are. I'm looking here. According to the Secretary of State's website, we got 346,000 voters in Clark County. Doing the math here, you got about 190,000. Obviously, not everybody's voting, but we still have tens of thousands of ballots to count here, and those are breaking, so far at least, for Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. Cowlitz County, it's the opposite. You see Joe Kent taking in about 55% of the ballots that have been counted so far. 75,000 voters registered in that county. You're seeing a little less than 40,000 in so far, so you can see where Joe Kent could make up some ground there, and that is why this one still is too close to call, despite 71% of the votes being counted. A lot of people paying close attention to this one because this could be a big indicator of which direction the U.S. House could be looking moving forward. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Yeah, Matthew, a lot at stake there. Thank you so much. And let's go back to our state's governor's race. As we mentioned, you know, the AP called it for Bob Ferguson as the next governor of our state. We want to go to Frankie Thompson, who's at the Republican Watch Party with Reaction Now. Frankie.
Hi, Hannah. Hello, everyone. The Republican candidate, Dave Reichert, has not entered the room yet. Of course, the AP is calling this rate going to Democrat candidate Bob Ferguson, but the energy here is still very high. People are very excited to see the numbers continue coming in for who will be our next president. It's very, very loud in here. As you hear all of those cheers, people are very excited as the numbers continue rolling in throughout the country about who will be our next president. They're also really excited about one of the local ballot initiatives that appears to be moving forward. That's the natural gas. That initiative appears to be moving forward, which these voters say they supported, they voted for. The energy is very high right now. We are still waiting for Dave Reichert to enter the room, address his supporters, address his voters. They were just saying up on the stage there that this time last year, this room was completely empty. Obviously, a very different scene here. Lots of people full of energy, full of excitement on this election night here at the Hyatt in Bellevue. A lot of people sticking around just to see what else will develop as we continue watching the results come in at the national level as well as the local level. We are going to stick around because we don't want to miss that opportunity for Reichert to address his voters, his supporters. We'll, of course, have much more from our voters as well as the Republican candidate. For now, it's so loud in here. I'm going to send it back to you in the studio so we can continue monitoring this watch party. Thank you.
All right, Frankie, thank you very much. We've got some more election results for you. Let's go through some of the U.S. House district elections. This one, a lot of people watching this one, Hannah.
Yeah, so this is Dan Newhouse, the longtime incumbent. You know, this is a race between 2 Republicans here. And the narrative on this one is the fact that Dan Newhouse was one of the Republicans that voted to impeach Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump really put his support behind Jared Sessler in this one. So that's really been the talking point in this race. And as you can see, it's very close, 51% to 48%. You really can't call this one yet, so we'll just have to see and wait to 50 52% for Perez, Joe Kent at 48% on this one. The AP has not called any of these races yet because they're still too close to call at this very moment. Let's now move to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, the leader of, the education system in Washington State. And Chris Rakedahl, he's the incumbent, 54%, comfortable lead right now over David Olson, who is at 46%, and he is with the Peninsula School District, David Olson, so he was also not new to education, but Chris Rakedahl clearly had some name recognition here, David.
In the race for Attorney General, we had a political newcomer in Nick Brown. He was the U.S. Attorney in Seattle before resigning for that and then running for Attorney General, and looks like he is going to be our next Attorney General. The AP has not called this race, but if history tells us something, it's hard to overcome a 56 to 44% vote, but 57% have been counted, so there is a ways to go. Miracles do happen, but right now Nick Brown is handily leading in the race for Attorney General.
We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back to our election night coverage. You Decide 2024, and as we look at the initiatives, this is the natural gas to take away your natural gas. This is what the threat was from the people who wanted this initiative. Right now, it seems that has worked because so far it's passing, but still, this is just too close. The big concern there was that that with this, the state was going to take away all your natural gas. That's probably some untruths there, but a lot of people were worried about it. So 51.2% to 48.8%. Let's go out to Dave Reichert right now, and we'll see if he concedes this race after the AP has called Bob Ferguson the winner.
All right, somebody back there is my age and has a hearing aid. Or doesn't have a hearing aid. What an honor it is for me to stand in front of you tonight.
Fire! Kamala is gone.
Thank you. All right, you fought a tough battle. It's not over yet, right? No, we're going to wait. You know me from my other campaigns. We are not going to concede this race until the last vote is counted, period. I know that Bob Ferguson has already declared victory, but he declared victory 6 months ago, right? But we are going to wait until the last vote is counted because that's what we do in the United States of America. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. I want us to
Washington State is a pragmatic and progressive state made up of hardworking individuals who are moving forward, looking to the future, and ready to solve problems. And tonight, in making their choice for their next governor, the people of Washington State chose a pragmatic and progressive vision for our future. I am happy to announce that thanks to your support, thanks to your doorbelling, to your donations, to your phone banking, to your hard work, I'll be serving as your next governor. And because of your hard work, Washington State is contributing its electoral votes to try and send Kamala Harris to the White House. Now, let me just take one moment about that presidential election. We are hopeful that Kamala Harris, who I had the privilege of serving with as Attorney General when she was the Attorney General of California, we're optimistic for her campaign. But I want to be very clear to each and every one of you. If that result does not go the way we want, I want to be very clear. There is nobody running for statewide office this year anywhere in the United States who is more prepared to defend your freedoms against that administration than I am. And I'm excited that if that day was to come, I will have the best partner to be the next Attorney General, Nick Brown, to help me in that effort. Now, we launched this campaign last year in Spokane, Washington, the city where I started off as a young lawyer. And I made two core commitments to this campaign when we launched this campaign. First, we would reject all donations from large corporations and corporate PACs. Why? Because this is a people-powered grassroots campaign promoted and supported by Washingtonians just like you. And second, we committed to campaigning and seeking votes in all 39 counties. Why? Because I'll be a governor for all Washingtonians. Now, we could not have this decisive victory tonight, and it is decisive, without the help of my incredible campaign team led by Catherine Bodman and Bailey Burgess. Give it up for both of them. Bailey's right here. And I also want, look, campaigns are tough. And I appreciate Dave Reichert stepping up and running for governor. He ran a hard-fought campaign. Please join me in a big round of applause and thanking Dave Reichert for his many years of service to the people of the state of Washington. And speaking of thank yous, let's give it up for Governor Jay Inslee and Trudy Inslee. Now, look, campaigns are a family operation. And as some of you know, I'm from a large family of 7 kids. All of my siblings are here tonight, along with my extended family of in-laws and cousins and nephews and nieces. Please thank them for supporting me throughout this political campaign and all my campaigns for the last 20 years. And speaking of family, I'm joined by my wife, Colleen, who was, when I first ran for office against a 20-year incumbent, went doorbelling with me on a cold January day, that very first time. We called those doorbelling dates. And she gave me, for my first campaign kickoff 20 years ago, the crowd was a little bit smaller than this, Colleen, I think. She gave me this red tie as a good luck tie. So please give for Colleen, a great educator, a great mom, a wonderful spouse. And we're joined by our twins, who we're very proud of, Jack and Katie, who created a popular Instagram page for the campaign that many of you follow. We have a cat named Peter. The Instagram page is Peter for First Cat of Washington State. Peter now has more Instagram followers than I do. Find him on Instagram and follow. Peter for First Cat. Look, Jack and Katie starred in our first campaign ad. You saw them in that first ad. Katie appeared in that ad with her entire softball team. Her team's in the house. Seattle Spice, the coaches. And Jack appeared in that ad alongside me on a trail with our backpacks on. Jack and I are working on climbing the 100 highest peaks in Washington. And Jack, I'm looking forward to more peaks this summer, right? We'll knock them off. Now look, Jack knows that climbing a mountain, a challenging mountain, begins with a fundamental truth. You start with the first step. And tomorrow morning, we're going to get up and start that first step of transitioning to a new administration to be your governor, to fight for you every step of the way. And here's what you can expect from me as your next governor. I will lead a government that protects our core freedoms, that makes the lives of Washingtonians a little bit better, that cuts down on bureaucracy, that gets in the way of serving the people, that makes our community safer and healthier, that works for the people, not special interests, and that generates more opportunities for the next generation of Washingtonians. Now, let me conclude my remarks with the story that I told when I first announced my campaign for governor. I was at a conference once, years ago, and it was a panel of former governors who were on this panel. And they'd long left politics. They were no longer running for office. And it was a fascinating panel. And somebody asked them a great question. Do you have any regrets from your time being governor of your state? And each one of them gave the same version of an answer, which was basically saying, I regret that I pulled my punches on big issues. I regret that I let political considerations dissuade me from moving forward in a way that someone had told me was the right thing to do. I want to be clear to each and every one of you and to the people of the great state of Washington, I will not have that regret as your governor. As your Attorney General with a fantastic team, we fought for you every single day. We did not pull our punches. And as your governor, I will center you, each and every one of you, red counties, blue counties, Republicans, Democrats, independents, you are top of my mind. I'm thinking of you, will advocate for you, will make Washington even a greater state than it is today. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's go get them. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Bob Ferguson declaring the winner as governor, but Dave Reichert not conceding tonight in his speech. We're going to get more of his speech for you and share that with you just a little bit later. Right now, the vote 57% to 43%, but Dave Reichert saying we're not going to concede until every vote has been counted. But let's bring in Randy. Dose of reality here for Dave Reichert. He's already thanking him for his service, and he got a smattering of applause, Bob Ferguson, when he said that for Dave. But Dave sounds like he's in this until the very end.
Well, and for good reason. I mean, Congressman Reichert had a couple of his first elections where he was behind on election night, and he was written off as having lost the election, and he came back to win it. So I think that it's just ingrained in him that, no, we're going to wait until the votes get counted. That being said, a majority of the votes that will be cast, that will ultimately be counted, have been counted tonight. I mean, they're all in from the 39 counties. And 14 points is a very, very difficult road to make up. So I suspect that when the morning comes and they have the opportunity to look at those numbers, they'll come to the same conclusion. Again, unfortunate, because I think that Congressman Reichert deserved better as a candidate than he got in resources and support from the party. And that ultimately made sure that this was the result that we'd see.
And Reuven, you know, we talked about the money too. I mean, it's no secret that the Democrats, they had a money machine going this election cycle, and it's certainly showing in the results.
It is showing about $22 million between the campaign and outside money for Bob Ferguson, and about $6 or $7 million, something like that, for Dave Reichert. So no question. At the same time, look, I think there's a pattern here that is important to talk about, and that is, you know, four years ago, Lauren Culp was the Republican nominee. This year, it's Dave Reichert. There is a challenge between the Trump wing of the party and generally seen as the more moderate wing represented by Dave Reichert, and the numbers are in the same ballpark. So, I mean, there is a brand issue here associated in Washington State relative to the national brand of the Republicans. And, you know, Bob Ferguson's been Attorney General for 12 years. He's incredibly well qualified. He's a thoughtful guy, and you know, a lot of folks think that he's going to be a great governor. So, you know, I mean, these are really strong numbers.
Time will certainly tell. That is for sure. All right, Ruben, thank you.
Yeah, so next we want to talk about the Lands Commissioner's race, and this is between Jamie Herrera-Butler and Dave Upthegrove, and this is a big one. We understand that our reporter Alejandro Guzman is there, got one side and talked to the campaign there. So, Ali, what do you have for us? What's the latest?
Hannah, let me tell you that this party just keeps getting rowdier and rowdier. I mean, you can hear the noise in the background. It is quite the celebration for Democrats all across Washington. But as you guys mentioned, this Lands Commissioner spot is something that we've been keeping a close eye on, especially since the primaries, where it was a very crowded ballot. And Upthegrove actually they triggered a hand recount against Sue Peterson. And at the end of the day, Upthegrove came out on top with just 49 votes. So he says that he's energized, but he says at the national level, we still have to be very optimistic. He says that he's hopeful that at the end of the day, Harris will be the next president of the United States. But the key word here is hope, especially at the local level. He hopes that Washington voters will not only embrace him, but elect him. Take a listen.
The race for Commissioner of Public Lands in the primary was decided by 49 votes, but I'm hopeful tonight that Washington voters will embrace the evergreen state's values of conservation and elect me in a landslide.
Now, those early results show Upthegrove leading 53% against Jamie Herrera-Butler, who's currently at 46.2%. Again, he's not claiming victory here, but should he win, he's ready to step in and manage those nearly 6 million acres of land across the state. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm excited to manage these state lands in the public interest for all the people of the state of Washington, not just for industry. And that means protecting our clean air, clean water, and habitat, improving wildfire prevention response, and the old Boy Scout in me wants to increase the recreational opportunities people have on our state lands.
We know that this job is important for a lot of reasons, especially because they have to fight and manage those wildfires that we know have devastated our lands across the entire state. They've charred landscape, they've destroyed homes, and of course, we've seen the polluted air during our summertime. The money from these lands also goes back right into our schools, which is something Upthegrove is very committed to. He says he wants to create jobs. He wants to make sure that nurture rural economies, and he's sure that he can do this if he were to be elected. But again, there's a lot going on here. There's still a lot we have to get to. Again, he's not claiming victory here, but he is the one leading at this point in time. We know that Herrera-Butler would be the one Republican that would take this spot. But the one thing that we probably haven't mentioned, and he did want to make a big deal about this, is that he would be the first person to take a seat at the state level who is an openly LGBTQ person. So again, still a lot to get to. We'll keep sending it back to you guys.
All right, Ali, Dave Upthegrove is on the podium now. Let's listen into his speech tonight.
They don't belong to big business. They belong to we, the people. They're public lands, our lands. And let me be clear, the people have delivered a powerful mandate for change. As your next lands commissioner, I will manage our public lands in the public interest for all the people of the state of Washington, Western and Eastern. And as we look forward, I am ready to focus on the challenges we face to protect our clean air, clean water, and habitat, improve wildfire prevention and response, and increase the recreational opportunities so more people have the opportunities that I did as a young Boy Scout. And I have confidence in our ability to meet these challenges head on with strength and with optimism and with the determination that defines our state. I want to express my appreciation to Jamie Herrera-Butler for her dedication, passion, and professionalism throughout this campaign. She is a gifted communicator, and I appreciated the substantive debates we had about the future of our state lands. And now I look forward to serving and leading the incredibly talented staff at the Department of Natural Resources. And I am committed to leading this agency with respect, professionalism, integrity, and yes, joy to uplift the work that inspires us and bring out the best of the employees as we serve the public together. I want to thank my campaign manager, Emma Mudd. I would not be here without her and the rest of our small but mighty campaign team. I want to thank my family, including my husband, Chad Harper, who's here tonight. And I will forever be grateful to the hundreds of volunteers and the thousands of grassroots donors who fueled this campaign. This is truly a night to celebrate a Washington that belongs to all of us. And tonight, as we look to the future of our lands and our waters, I want to pause and acknowledge those whose courage made it possible for all of us to stand here. I think about those who in the early hours of a June night in 1969 refused to back down from their place at a bar in Stonewall. They didn't know it, but they set a course for every LGBTQ person to live openly, without fear, and with pride. Harvey Milk, the late Harvey Milk, famously said, "You gotta give them hope." Well, tonight, you are proving that this state is a place of hope, a place where we bring every voice to the table to shape the future that we want. I'm humbled to build on the legacy of Washington's own trailblazers, like the late Senator Cal Anderson, who was our first openly gay state legislator. Cal had a vision for a state where everyone belongs.
All right, so that's Dave Up the Grove. The Associated Press has not called this race officially, but let's bring in Reuven Carlisle and Randy Peppel. And so, Reuven, this came as a bit of a surprise. I think we didn't expect this to be such a wide divide right now, but there were also a lot of eyes on this race.
Yeah, there are. You know, Jamie Herrera Butler, I think, is a unique person in the sense that she was one of 10 members of Congress, of course, who voted to impeach President Trump at the time. She lost her congressional seat over that. So I think a lot of Democrats in Washington just hold her in regard in terms of her independence and her willingness to, of course, buck the tide on that tough issue at that time. So I think the fact that she ran a strong campaign, of course, we don't really know the final results on this one. I mean, there's no question that the next week could, could affect that. But she's widely regarded. She got a strong endorsement from the Seattle Times. That's a statewide paper of record, had a big impact on that. So, I think she's widely regarded, and maybe there's some of the Trump wing of the Republican Party that just weren't going to vote for her. So maybe she got a few Democrats and lost a few Republicans. But, Dave Up the Grove is well-regarded King County Council member, and I think he ran for Commissioner of Public Lands a number of years ago as well. Didn't win that time, so this is the second time. So I think he cares a lot about these issues, and I think, this is a reflection of where the public is.
But it almost sounded like in his speech, and going back to what David said, I mean, it almost sounded like a victory speech, and it's too early to call that race. And I know that you might be surprised on this one, because I know when you and I talked months ago about this race, you thought that Jamie Herrera Butler really had a good chance. So what happened here?
Well, I think she fell victim to the same problem that other Republicans did, which there is no infrastructure at the state level to provide resources for statewide Republican candidates. And she was able to, right now, be running ahead of other statewide Republicans, which is why, Dave Up the Grove's rather arrogant speech declaring victory when it is still up for grabs, kind of tells you a little bit about Dave Up the Grove. And Jamie Herrera Butler, she gets to live to see tomorrow and the next day's results, and hopefully she'll close that gap. If she does not, she's run a strong campaign. We'll have to look at, as Reuven said, we'll have to look at some of the statistics and see, did Republicans not support her, and ultimately will that be the difference in this race because they were mad about the Trump vote on impeachment?
Yeah, a lot of analysis ahead for sure to figure out exactly what happened in that race.
And so let's now go to the Pierce County Sheriff's race. This is another good one that we've been closely watching. Wow, look at those numbers. Keith Swang, 51%, to Patty Jackson, 48%. We're going to go to break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about this one, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our You Decide 2024 coverage, and the Associated Press has now said that the capital gains tax is going to fail.
Right. So we got 2109. That's the initiative that they were trying to repeal the capital gains tax. That measure, the initiative, it has failed with 63% of the vote. So clearly, voters are saying we're okay with the capital gains tax
kind of
that's in
what
place.
you think it is.
It is very confusing. I know. When you look at this, you're like, what does that even mean? What it really means is that the voters have said, keep the capital gains tax. We don't care about that. We like it, and so therefore it is going to stay. I know the people who are for the capital gains tax, a lot of them were saying, that side was saying, hey, look, we need school funding, we need money from this coming, and that message clearly resonating with the voters, because it is won there as far as the AP is concerned, and obviously the numbers say that. Let's move on to 2117 carbon. We're calling it, well, it is basically
Cap and Invest.
Yes, Cap and Invest, but it is essentially the Climate Commitment Act, and this initiative was trying to repeal portions of the Climate Commitment Act. It failed. So that means that the Climate Commitment Act lives, it survives, with a whopping 62% of voters rejecting the initiative to overturn portions of the Climate Commitment Act. So let's talk about this. We've got Reuven Carlyle, our Democratic analyst here, and you are the expert on this, because for those of you joining us, Reuven Carlyle actually co-wrote the Climate Commitment Act, and for the past, for several months, you've been, fighting against 2117.
That's right. Well, 2117, look, the Climate Commitment Act is a cap and invest carbon pricing legislation, and it is a global best practice. Now that it's been reaffirmed by the voters and this initiative has been defeated, it presents the opportunity to link our markets with California and Quebec, and that not only lowers costs, but it increases the quality of the investments that are possible. So it's a strong public policy. I'm very proud of it. Governor Inslee deserves a lot of credit. He worked very hard on this. And I think a lot of us believe that state-level climate action is very, very important.
Before I get to Randy, though, I do want to ask you for those people who voted for this initiative. And the reason why they voted for the initiative was the concern that it drove up gas prices. As you saw Brian Haywood, when he was advertising his initiative, he was saying that that was one of the reasons why when we go to the gas station, we're paying such high prices. So do you believe, for somebody who wrote this, is it maybe necessary to go back and change some of the writing in the Climate Commitment Act? Could we change it so that way, it could possibly be a win for everybody?
Yeah, well, it's a fair question. I think being sensitive to where the public is in terms of affordability is a real deal issue. We all know that. Everyone's feeling that across the country about affordability. At the same time, the price of gasoline today is less expensive than it was before the Climate Commitment Act. So there is not evidence to suggest that anything other than global crude prices and the issues of the oil industry are really central to the price of gasoline at the pump. Not pretending like there's not an effect, but it's not nearly at the level that people are argued in their campaign, and the public is validating that.
The Associated Press has called that one for sure, Tom.
Randy, you have a look on your face,
Well, with all due respect to the former senator, the only thing that this initiative has proven efficient at is extracting money from consumers of Washington State. The campaign against the initiative was a completely false one. It did not raise any of the realities of what this carbon tax is going to do to Washington State, and the benefits that are claimed by the pro side those in favor of it just do not exist. It is not going to lower global emissions by anything. It is not going to help the state of Washington do anything but spend more money on Democrats' constituencies that will pour more money into future Democratic campaigns. And that is primarily the extraction that this initiative is proven to be. And the reality is when you spend $40 million on initiatives to pass them or to defeat them, you have greater chance of success. And that's what you had here. You had a spending level by those who benefit from the money taken from consumers to make sure that that money's locked in for the future.
So let's get to Shira Matsuzawa, because she's at Brian Haywood's camp. And Shira, you know, when I interviewed Brian Haywood earlier in the year, I want to say that he was feeling very confident about these initiatives passing. Obviously, the tide has turned. So what is he saying tonight?
Yeah, and you know, Hannah, he was actually feeling very confident when, before those ballots actually, the polls closed and we got those final results, or the results are still coming in. But, you know, when I talked to him just a couple of hours ago, he was saying he believes all 4 initiatives will pass. Unfortunately, now he's kind of changing his tune. Moments ago, he addressed the crowd saying it looks like only 1 of the 4 initiatives will pass. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I'm going to go out with my chin up and feel like this was not a loss. Number 1, we got 4 out of 7 passed. Okay? We got 3 laws that they definitely didn't want to pass in the House and Senate, passed by the House and Senate, and we forced a bipartisan majority to support them. That's pretty incredible.
And you can hear the somber tone there in his voice. Now, he told me, we also talked to him just moments ago off before we actually talked to you here on camera. We'll share some of that with you a little later. But he said he's disappointed. He's disappointed by the results that came in today. Obviously, you know, he spent, this fight started not this year, but rather last year. And the fight started right here, but he'll still continue to fight. And we'll share some of that with you coming up later in the newscast as well. I'll send it back to you in the meantime.
All right, Shira, thank you very much. We're going to talk about some protests that happened in Seattle earlier. The Seattle police sending out a tweet saying that they were monitoring some protests and actually made some arrests. Let's find out what's going on with that situation. We got Fox 13's Jennifer Dowling, who was out at the scene. So, Jen, what's this protest all about and what happened?
Well, there was a group of about 30 to 50 people that were marching through the streets, wearing all black, and sometimes during this march dragging scooters into the street, and then also leaving some graffiti behind and some property damage, according to Seattle police. We have not seen any broken windows or anything like that. It looked to be mostly writing on the buildings, and also, again, moving those scooters around and possibly damaging those. So social media posts showed the group on Broadway and in the area of Pike and 11th and 12th earlier in the night. We don't exactly know what affiliation the group had, but Seattle police posted images that showed that a lot of the graffiti was left behind here and in Cal Anderson Park. Now, I did reach out to SPD. They got back to me and said that all 5 arrests that were made tonight were made for property damage. Shortly after those arrests started happening, the group kind of started breaking up and then eventually completely dissolved. So it's quiet out here tonight in Capitol Hill. We did talk to a man who said that he was a little disturbed because there was a helicopter in the air, which he said was looking at the group. That was his perception, and it made him a little nervous. So some people out here were a little on edge with the police presence, but again, that particular action by the police has cleared up at this time. Reporting live Live in Seattle, Jennifer Dowling, Fox 13 News.
Jennifer, thank you so much. All right, so taking a look right now, Tanya Wu and Alexis Mercedes Rink. This was the Seattle City Council position 8. It was an at-large position there, and you see Tanya Wu at 42% to Alexis Mercedes Rink at 57%. And we are hearing that Tanya Wu is conceding. Now, the AP, I understand, have not called this race yet, but Tanya Wu herself, looking at the numbers here, clearly seeing that she's not going to be able to overcome this. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Tanya Wu's been in the job for the last 8 months. She was appointed to the position. It's an at-large position. So she's basically running to keep the job that she had, but according to these votes, she's losing handily. So let's talk about this. Was this, Randy, because it's a citywide race here that Tanya Wu is not able to hold on her position, or is just Mercedes Rink have such a groundswell of support here and has a more progressive platform?
I think it is a presidential year with high turnout. Seattle is the most liberal city in the state. The most liberal candidate will win. That's all this is. It has nothing to do with Tanya Wu's 8 months of service as an appointed member of the council or Ms. Rink's campaign. She's the furthest left of the Seattle candidates in a far left turnout election.
Is this a trend, though, Reuven? Because, you know, Tanya Wu, moderate Democrat against a more far-left candidate, and the far-left candidate, you know, looking like she's going to win this. So is this indicative of some type of trend that you're seeing?
Yeah, one campaign is tough to see as a trend. I mean, Sean Scott for the state representative position in the 43rd district, which is Capitol Hill and central part of the city, he won overwhelmingly. He's on the far, far left by any definition as part of the Democratic Socialists. So, you know, so that's two races. But ultimately, I think Randy's right. There's a broader dynamic this year with Trump at the top of the ticket, and you know, the public has engaged in that race very much, and I think people did not have a sense from Tanya Wu as an 8-month member of the city council, some broad, comprehensive agenda. So,
well, public safety was big on her agenda. She was talking about it a lot in the days of the election, but we actually heard from Tanya Wu tonight after getting some of those numbers. So let's listen to her.
I don't know the numbers, but we are not in the lead. And so I want to thank everybody for supporting me in the campaign. I'm really proud of the campaign that we ran. I think we really focused on the issues and focused on the positivity of everything, and did not. And so I'm really proud of everybody and your support, and we're going to be resilient and strong and continue the work that we're doing and fighting for our communities.
All right, so that was Tanya Wu that you just heard from, and essentially she has conceded that race to Alexis Mercedes Rink in the Seattle City Council 8 position. Now take a look here, U.S. House District 3. This was literally something that so many people across the country has been paying attention to, because this really could tip over the, you know, the balance of power, and so they were watching this very closely. You have the Democrat here holding on to the lead still at 52%, and then you have Joe Kent, the Republican, at 48%. Let's go to District 4 now, if we can. District 4 is another one in central Washington, and that is between Dan Newhouse, longtime incumbent, against Jared Sesser. This is between two Republicans here. And then next, let's go to District 6, if we can. This one, very interesting, Emily Randall versus Drew McEwen. And this was an open seat because this was open after Derek Kilmer left, and Emily Randall getting a lot of support really early on. Even this is that race that Hillary Franz, you know, was ousted from. So Emily Randall came out, and now here she is on top, 57%. Let's bring in our political analysts here. Let's talk about those congressional races. Any of them a surprise to you, Reuven? Let's start with you.
Yeah, Emily Randall's a state senator from the 26th legislative district, which is Gig Harbor. So super conservative, moderate district. And so she really connected well with her district in terms of the larger congressional district. She ran just an absolutely fabulous campaign, grassroots from from the bottom up from the very beginning. There was a very strange dynamic in the primary relative to a bunch of crypto money that came in on that race. So that was an interesting factor. Drew McEwen is a state senator also from Mason County, fabulous, well-regarded guy. So it was a super sort of thoughtful, genuine conversation. And then, of course, the television ads take over. But Emily Randall will be a great member of Congress. She's Latina. She's also openly gay. And so we have Dave Upthegrove likely to be commissioner as openly out gay man and a woman, Latina. So, you know, and then also Kim Schreier as a woman and Senator Maria Cantwell. We just have a very strong women leaders in this state, and I think that this is a continued reflection of that impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the 6th Congressional District is a little bit different than it was when Norm Dix represented it for several decades. And Emily Randall took advantage of that. Her hardest race was getting through the primary. And as Reuven said, you know, over $1 million of crypto money came in on her side, even though she said she didn't make any promises to the crypto people for anything. And that lifted her past a primary opponent in Emily Franz, the current lands commissioner, that got her into the general election. And it appears she's going to prevail. It is just another one of those races, though. Unfortunately, I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record, where the overwhelming financial advantage that she had allowed her to run a television campaign that talked about her being a moderate. All of her electronic stuff on email and her social media was much more focused, as Reuven said, on her LGBTQ status. That was not something she ran on TV. That was something that she played elsewhere, and certainly she was segmenting her audience to maximize her votes.
You know, I have to say that she's very well regarded in Olympia as a state senator. She's a very thoughtful person from a policy point of view, and ran just a fabulous campaign. But also, again, I think that this type of campaign with Drew McEwen and Emily Randall is exactly what you want from public service. Two high-integrity public servants who really care about their communities, and I think she'll be a great member of Congress.
But it sure shows what a lot of money can do. You see it in the votes. All right, let's go to Matt Smith. He's tracking the ballots of power tonight in the Senate. Matt, any big upsets there?
Yeah, well, we definitely have a change at the very least that we can report now. The Senate is now officially going to be held by the Republicans moving forward into this next session. 51 Republicans to 42. We still have 7 races yet to be called. And the one that was just called was the one that we were talking about earlier that would have been the biggest surprise. Deb Fischer was behind. She has regained a lot of votes in those rural counties when they started coming in Nebraska. The AP officially calling this for Deb Fischer. So at this point in time, one of the biggest things that we could take away tonight so far is that the Senate will officially be in control of Republicans moving forward, and they could still make up more ground. 7 yet to be called. That includes a highly contested one in Montana with John Tester. If we want to pull that up here. This has been one of those that everybody's been paying attention to, and Tim Sheehy already up 58% to just under 40% for John Tester, who is the Democrat incumbent in this race. We should state only 16% of the vote is in, so this is too close to call, obviously, but they could see a more Republican numbers run up throughout the night. If you've been paying attention to your screen throughout the night, obviously, we're taking a look at the presidential race as well. And obviously, this has been a positive night for former President Trump. At this point, he has 230 electoral votes, and you see where the counties are in these states. Now, the blue wall is going to come very important in the next couple of hours, maybe the next couple of days, depending on when this race eventually gets called. But you start to see in some of these states where the votes aren't counted for instance, in Michigan, Donald Trump doing really well right now, 52% of the vote with 55% in. So you're starting to see trends going towards Republicans in both the president, certainly in the Senate. The next question is going to be, which direction do we see the U.S. House moving forward? there are still 104 races to be called here. This is going to take a lot longer to work out, and we'll have to see whether or not we're moving all towards Republican control or if we're going to have a split layers of legislature. But either way, it's getting very interesting as we see all these races, and really it's too close to call anything outside of the Senate race when it comes to balance of power. We'll send it back to you.
All right, we're going to continue with more You Decide 2024 election coverage after a quick break. Welcome back to our coverage. The Associated Press has called the election for governor for Bob Ferguson. This is the totals right now with 59% of the votes counted so far. Bob Ferguson, 56% to Dave Reichert, 44%. Dave Reichert is not conceding this race and says he will wait to see every vote counted.
Yeah, Fox 13's Lauren Donovan is at the Democratic Watch Party right now where Ferguson gave a speech not too long ago. Lauren, so let us know, were you able to talk to anybody else in that watch party? How are people feeling?
So it really seems like, Hannah, folks are shuffling out. A lot of the congresswomen like Pramila Jayapal, Kim Schreier, they are leaving the building, going to areas, meeting up with loved ones. Not a lot of time to talk with us here in the media, though after Governor Inslee and his wife Trudy were on stage speaking, I think the crowd is starting to dissipate here a little bit. Folks not so happy with what they're seeing on the national stage, and I think that's part of it. But, you know, after 12 years of Governor Inslee, we are getting change. Washington now has a 23rd governor, and that is Bob Ferguson, our current Attorney General. And he was up on stage as well earlier tonight, speaking with family, friends, loved ones. Here's what he had to say.
And I made two core commitments to this campaign when we launched this campaign. First, we would reject all donations from large corporations and corporate PACs. Why? Because this is a people-powered grassroots campaign promoted and supported by Washingtonians just like you. And second, we committed to campaigning and seeking votes in all 39 counties. Why? Because I'll be a governor for all Washingtonians.
Now, if we look at the history of the governor's office, of our 23 now elected governors here in Washington state, only 2 of them now have been attorney generals, and other than Bob Ferguson, the last one was Christine Gregoire. And it's worth noting this office, he's coming from the AG's office, comes with a lot of power. We're talking about the state top attorney, and I've got numbers here as to, you know, the folks he was running and leading as really an executive of that role. 28 divisions, more than 1,800 employees, including nearly 800 800 attorneys representing 230 state boards. So that is a lot of influence and power that Bob Ferguson, many called him the heir apparent, already had coming into this race, that now he's going to translate into Olympia. We're going to see what comes to fruition. Is he going to echo Inslee, because he was endorsed by the former governor? So we'll have to see how that goes. But the mood is not as excited, I would say, here at Democrat headquarters as it was when you last saw me. So vibes have changed a little bit. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Party's winding down there. All right, thank you very much. Well, let's go over to the Republican Watch Party in Bellevue. Frankie Thompson is there, and we heard from Dave Reichert a little bit earlier. Frankie?
Yeah, David, we did hear from Dave Reichert. He finally came to address his supporters, his voters here at the Hyatt in Bellevue, and he had a clear message. Some of the first words that came out of his mouth, he said he is not going to concede this race until every vote is counted. We want to show you his full speech, his full address to his supporters, so you can have a better understanding of his clear message.
We are not going to concede this race until the last vote is counted. I know the President has already declared victory, but he declared victory 6 months ago. We're going to wait until the last vote is counted, because that's what we do in the United States of America. Every vote counts. I want us to leave tonight with a smile on our face. There's a lot of votes to count. But I want you to know this too. The numbers don't look good for us right now, but I do believe that God has a plan. Now, I've been criticized by a landowner for invoking the name of God. But I'll tell you, one of the things I don't want you to do is move. I'm not even going to ask you the question, how many of you in here, because I've heard it over the last year and a half or so. A lot of people said they might move. I want you to stay and fight. We need to stay and fight. We need to hold. I told my team upstairs that I just appreciate all the work, and my family. All of my families here today have been through this with us. The energy that you have, that you put forth in this campaign, we should all be proud of. We should all be proud of. This is a tough state, and it's gotten tougher. And we are going to stay, and we are going to hold this government accountable no matter if we win. We're certainly going to hold this government accountable, and even more so if we happen to lose. We are going to stay, and we're going to hold them accountable and keep up the fight. We're going to end crime in the state. We're going to fight back on taxes. We're going to fight back on regulation. And we're going to fight for our children in the education system. How many of you in here doorbells? Thank you. Look at all those hands. How many put up signs?
want you to keep the faith, keep strong, keep on fighting. Dave Reichert is not going anywhere. Dave Reichert is going to stay here with you. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah. But we are going to fight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you for all you have.
Washington has not had a Republican governor since the 80s, but as you just heard Dave Reichert said, he is not going to concede this race until every vote is counted. Despite the outcome, he says, we as Washingtonians should do our part in holding the government accountable. He says there needs some accountability when it comes to addressing crime in our state, accountability addressing all of the challenges our public schools systems are facing, accountability when it comes to taxes in our state. Of course, we're going to continue monitoring every development in this race for governor. We also had a chance to speak with Reichert a bit one-on-one in the crowd. We're going to hear more of his comments later in our newscast on Fox 13. For now, we'll send it back to you in the studio. Georgia.
All right, Frankie, thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. We'll talk about the state legislature and what's happening there when our 2024 You Decide election coverage continues. Election night coverage, and national eyes are on this race here in Washington, in the Vancouver area, between Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, who currently is in the seat, the House District seat, trying to hold on to it. Right now, she's got 52% of the vote to Joe Kent's 48%, 71% reporting, but still Clark County has not fully reported, and there's lots of votes there, so this is not a done deal yet.
Yeah, so we want to go to AJ Janival, who's covering District 3 for us in Clark County. So AJ, what can you tell us? We saw you not too long ago. Has the mood there changed at all?
Well, Hannah, as you heard David just mentioning, you have those results, those early results coming in, showing that Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez has that 4% lead, but it's so close. And this is kind of like a redo of 2 years ago when the two candidates went up against each other. And again, it was so close. Just a few minutes ago, Joe Kent here taking the first time of the night to speak to his party. That's because he has actually been out at the election offices here in Clark Clark County, about 30 minutes away from where the party is, over in Vancouver, talking to folks waiting in line. When we were there around 3 o'clock this afternoon, there was a line that stretched from the door down the sidewalk across the street. We spoke to the last person in line. They texted me a short while ago. They told me they waited more than 3 hours to get their vote heard. What both Kent and Glucin Camp Perez were saying on social media was, if you're in line at 8 o'clock, stay in line. That's how close this race is for this district. Both candidates telling people to stay in line. That line's so long, but they want all of those votes counted. 2 years ago, this came down to less than a percentage point. Now, this is a big race for our state, but it's a big race for the entire country, as there is this fight that's going on to see who will have the majority of the House. I spoke to the incumbent, Glucin Camp Perez, about what that means for her when her race has such a big impact on the entire nation.
People want to make this like a big national fight, and for me, we lose our power when we make it about somewhere else. Like, our influence is necessary because we are an independent community, you know, and I'm going to vote the same in no matter who's got the gavel. Like, I'm going to reflect the interests and the values of my community no matter who's in the majority, because that's what my community needs.
As I mentioned a short while ago, Kent took the stage, spoke to the folks who are here, and even though they're down by a few percentage points, the mood still remains optimistic. Again, when you look at the numbers from 2 years ago, you have these two candidates, and it was such a close race. When you see that it's only 4% with not all of the votes even close at this point to coming in, it makes sense that he would not even consider conceding and is still hopeful. We'll keep an eye on this race as we'll be here early in the morning with updates. But for now, here at the Republican Party for Joe Kent, they are not conceding in any way, shape, or form. Hannah?
AJ, thank you so much. And we were bringing in our political analyst, Randy Pepple, here, and Reuven Carlisle to talk a little bit about that District 3 race. But we also want to kind of talk a little bit about state legislative races as well. So anything quickly you want to mention about that District 3 race?
Well, just, I mean, the race was decided by 2,700 votes last time. It is going to be decided probably by a similar margin this time. We're not going to know for several days who the winner is. And right now, Glucin Camp Perez is riding a huge margin. She's winning by about 26,000 votes in Clark County. And that is, if that margin holds, she'll get reelected.
As far as the state legislative races goes, I mean, that's a congressional race. Let's focus on the state legislative race, because there's one that you had mentioned earlier, the Sean Scott versus Andres Juarez. That's the 43rd legislative district that includes Seattle, and we're seeing some big margins on that one with Sean Scott leading in a big way.
Yeah, that's isolated to Capitol Hill and sort of the 43rd legislative district exclusively within the city itself. So Sean Scott had the support of the entire political establishment, even though he's not officially a Democrat. He's more Democratic Socialist, so that's sort of one of those unique dynamics.
Come on, Reuven. He's not kind of a Democrat Socialist. He is a socialist, not a Democrat, running against a Democrat, and the Democrat Party said, we want the socialist. I mean, it's a far cry from having the power of Frank Chapis, the longest-serving speaker, represent the 43rd, to now having a Shama Sawant clone representing the 43rd. It's a huge step down.
It is a big change. I will say, though, the state Senate seat there is held by Jamie Peterson. State Senator Peterson is very widely regarded and expected to be the new state Senate majority leader. But, you know, going back to your point about the 3rd Congressional District, it generated a lot of turnout down in southwest Washington. So there's a handful of state legislative races, both the House and the Senate down there, that are being impacted by that big turnout in the 3rd Congressional District. And so the 17th State Legislative District, the 18th Legislative District, you might see 1 or 2 pickups in both the House and the Senate for Democrats down there, driven by that big turnout.
So the Democrats will strengthen their hold on the House and the Senate?
It looks likely, although the numbers have a ways to go on those races.
And we've talked about this in the state legislature. We all know that it already is, you know, leans Democrat. There's more Democrats in our state legislature than Republicans. Now, if the Democrats are able to win in some of these key races in the state legislature, what does that mean for a supermajority potential, or even say if we get to 60% of Democrats in the state legislature? We're talking about a situation potentially where they can pass budgets, they can pass bonds without having any Republican side. I mean, as a Democrat, I'm sure you're going to say, hey, that's a good thing.
Well, 60% is different than a 2/3 supermajority. 60% allows you to pass bonds, and that means basically transportation funding. So you can build a transportation budget.
Which is the biggest budget there is,
well, it's
right?
not the
One
biggest,
of the biggest.
But there's a lot of history of a bipartisan budget from the transportation budget. Senator Marco Elias, the chairman of the state's Senate Transportation Budget, and Representative Jake Fye, the chair of the House Transportation, overwhelmingly prefer and have a long history of bipartisan transportation budget. So I'm not sure that'll have quite the effect, and of course we don't know how many seats they'll pick up.
All right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see that over the next 2 weeks. I mean, in the races to watch in the state Senate up in the 10th district, which is Island County, where Senator Muzzle, the Republican, is narrowly winning, but it's a 50-50 race. And then, as Reuben highlighted, those races in the 17th and 18th district around the city of Vancouver are ones that one's an open seat, one's an incumbent race, and Republicans need to hold that to keep it from Democrats having 60 votes. And frankly, I suspect that Senator Elias, if he had 60 votes and the ability to, or 60%, he won't work with Republicans.
I got to stop you right there. We're going to take a quick break and come back with Fox 13 News at 10. We'll hear more from Randy and Reuben.
Election 2024, a night full of results that could redefine our country.
Our state.
I'm just not looking backwards, and honestly, I don't think voters are as well.
We have got to change the way, the direction that the state of Washington is going.
Our schools.
That OSPI has not been proactive enough.
Voters are going to get a great choice here, experience versus his inexperience.
And our environment and economy.
Cap and trade is probably the most regressive tax you could put on the economy.
Initiative 2117 is a deceptive initiative.
The Fox 13 team is tracking up-to-the-minute results and talking with the candidates at the center of these races.
Our complete live team coverage starts right now on Fox 13 News at 10.
Good evening and thank you for joining us for our You Decide 2024 coverage. I'm David Rose.
And I'm Hannah Kim. Results dropped about 90 minutes ago, and now we're starting to get a clearer picture on how this election is going to unfold here in Washington state. But first, let's check in on the biggest race of the night, of course, the presidential election. Take a look right now. This is a look at the electoral count. Donald Trump with 246, Vice President Kamala Harris with 210. You need 270 to win. So just minutes ago, we learned Kamala Harris will not speak tonight. Also, for the first time in 12 years, Washington will have a new governor. The AP calling the race for Democrat Bob Ferguson over Republican Dave Reichert, but Reichert says he's not conceding just yet. He wants all the votes to roll in before he throws in the towel.
What an honor it is for me to stand in front of you tonight. We fought a tough battle. It's not over yet, right? No, we're going to wait. You know me from my other campaigns. We are not going to concede this race until the last vote is counted, period.
Washington state is a pragmatic and progressive state made up of hardworking individuals who are moving forward, looking to the future, and ready to solve problems. I am happy to announce that thanks to your support, thanks to your doorbelling, to your donations, to your phone banking, to your hard work, I'll be serving as your next governor.
Well, Fox 13's Lauren Donovan is in Seattle at the Democratic Watch Party where Ferguson spoke. So, Lauren, what else are you hearing there tonight?
Hey there, Dave. I am being joined right now by Chastity Conrad, chair of the State Democratic Party. Chastity, okay, the crowd is beginning to dwindle. What is the energy like here, though, in the convention hall right now?
We had a packed room. I think people were feeling really excited about all of the victories that we've had here in Washington state. Certainly watching what's happening nationally, but I feel like Washington state voters know you count every vote, and sometimes that takes a few days.
All right, were there any races that you were a little bit worried about that have kind of eked through?
Well, I'm very excited that it looks like we are beating all of the initiatives that were backed by the Republican billionaires, and that they are all failing, so we're very happy about that. And then also down in CD3, Marie Glusenkamp-Perez is up right now, so we're super thrilled, and it looks like we've held on to all of the statewide offices as well.
You know, one of the most contentious races right in the primary that I was covering all the time, a public lands commissioner. So what was different in the sauce tonight that didn't make it such a close call as compared to, you know, what we saw months ago?
Yes, well, yes, certainly I was surprised that was the race in the primary that we were all watching so closely. But I think we built the coalition, and Dave was our clear Democrat, and we were so proud to just get everybody to support him, and he fell right in line with all the other statewides.
All right, and we are wrapping up, what, 12 years? My entire adult life, it has been Governor Inslee here in Washington state. What is it like to turn the page and start anew? I know he was up there on the stage tonight, and touch on, too, Ferguson as we move forward.
Yes, we love Governor Inslee. We've been so lucky to have him as our governor the past 12 years, but it is a real changing of the guard, and we're so excited to have Governor now. Governor Bob Ferguson, you know, he sued Trump 99 times when he was Attorney General, and we hope we never have to do that again, but it's really exciting to have such a progressive champion as our next governor.
All right, you said the name. We are moving forward, talking about what's at stake on the national scale. What is your perspective? What is the attitude from fellow Democrats right now as they're watching the numbers come in?
Certainly, we've been staying nauseously optimistic. You know, we had that pit in our stomach. I think all of us remembering 2016. But we know we just need to count every single vote. Give our friends in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan some time to count every single one of those votes. And last time in 2020, it got called over the weekend. So we're holding out hope that we're going to get there in a couple of days.
All right. And right now, if we were to keep track of race and people watching at home, what are the races still to watch? What is still outstanding?
Yeah, certainly the national picture we still have to see. Right here in Washington state, you know, we want to make sure that Marie down in Congressional District 3, we get her firmly across the finish line. We're feeling really good. We want to make sure on the statewide we're all good there. And then also we're looking to get our supermajorities in the state legislature. So we're watching in the 10th LD and the 14th LD and down in Vancouver area the 17th and the 18th as well.
Chastity, thank you so much for your time. There you've got it. Lots of Democrats on the stage tonight. Chastity was leading them all, wrapping up with, as I said, Governor Jay Inslee. After 12 years, Washington has elected its 23rd governor, and that will be Attorney General Bob Ferguson moving forward. We're going to continue here at the watch party tonight until as late as we can go, people. I'm going to send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Lauren, thank you so much. And let's turn now to the other side, or Frankie Thompson at the GOP party in Bellevue. Frankie.
Yes, Hannah, David, the energy is still very active and lively here at the Hyatt in Bellevue. Some of the crowd has dwindled only slightly, but a lot of people are very excited watching the numbers come in for who will be our next U.S. president. As we have been reporting, so far Donald Trump is leading the race here, but a lot of the folks are still sticking around supporting their candidate for Washington governor, Republican candidate Dave Reichert. Now, he has held several spots of leadership that have shaped our county and our region for several years. He was a King County sheriff. He was also elected as a U.S. representative, but his race for governor in Washington likely stops tonight. Despite that, though, he says that he is not conceding. He is going to wait until every single vote is counted. About an hour ago, he addressed his supporters and his voters in the room tonight. Let's hear what he had to say.
We're going to wait until the last vote is counted, because that's what we do in the United States of America. Every vote counts. I want us to leave tonight with a smile on our face. There's a lot of votes to count. But I want you to know this too. The numbers don't look good for us right now. But I do believe that God has a plan.
And again, you know, he says he's not conceding in this race. He's still hanging on, holding on. While he was in the crowd greeting voters, thanking them for coming out tonight, I did get a chance to speak with him, asking him a couple questions about his public safety plan to address the crime, the rampant crime that he says has been just destroying our state. We'll have more from him on his plan and what he hopes to do with that, if he's elected or not. We'll hear more of that in about 30 minutes. We'll send it back to you in the studio for now.
Frankie, thank you. And we're joined all night by our Fox 13 political analysts. We have Republican Randy Pepple here with us tonight and Democratic analyst Reuven Carlisle. Thanks for both of you being here tonight. And I want to start with you, Randy. Fentanyl, crime, graffiti, all the problems that are going on in our state. Dave Reichert said he was going to be the guy to clean that up. Bob Ferguson also tried to get on that "now I support law enforcement" campaign bandwagon, right? Nobody was buying that, but obviously the voters have spoken and they believe that Ferguson is the candidate. What happened with Reichert's campaign? Was this a money issue?
Well, first and foremost, it's the voters of state of Washington issue. I mean, Washington has gone the longest of any state in the country without electing a Republican governor. The last time a Republican won in the state was 1980. So that's the first challenge for any Republican candidate. The second challenge for Congressman Reichert was having Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, which is something that Democrats demonize very well to motivate their base and drive voters away from Republicans. The third challenge was financial. I mean, he just could not compete when he's getting outspent, 4 and 5 to 1 in a statewide race. And so Bob Ferguson had those resources at his disposal to rewrite history and say that he was pro-crime when he wanted drug legalization as Attorney General, when he said that he was against the bureaucracy, when he doubled the size of the office of the Attorney General while he was there. So he could get away with all of that because he had the money to tell one story as opposed to the truth that had come out over the previous 12 years. And ultimately, those three factors have worked against Dave Reichert.
As we know, Ferguson was endorsed by Governor Inslee, and so a lot of people know that, hey, they have similar policies. That's no secret. However, if there's any maybe differences, this is a question that I did have for Ferguson when I interviewed him a short time ago, but I'm curious about what you think, Reuven. How do you think Ferguson's role is going to be in as the governor? Is it going to be any big differences from Inslee, or are we going to kind of expect the same thing?
No, look, they're very different individuals. They're going to be Bob Ferguson's going to be his own governor, and he's going to step up and work on the issues that he's passionate about. But I got to say, I don't think you can ignore the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is the issue of reproductive choice. We are in a post-Dobbs world where Roe v. Wade was overturned. This is an overwhelmingly pro-choice state. People of this state support that policy. They've put it in law in a variety of different ways. And I just don't think you can ignore that Dave Reichert's record in Congress did not jive with where the majority of the public are. And then you have an issue of a gender gap that's very real. We have we have not just Senator Maria Cantwell and a number of members of Congress who are women, but we have a gender gap in terms of the voters. Women of this state are overwhelmingly pro-choice, and I think that is a reflection of this vote, because people understand that states make the decision on the issue of choice now, and so it is a state issue. You can't just put it off because it's covered by Roe v. Wade under the Supreme Court, because it's not anymore. And so that was something that Dave Reichert is just unable to overcome.
And yet that's complete BS, because the voters of Washington State legalized abortion before Roe v. Wade. And so when Roe v. Wade was overturned, Washington's own state law took over. The Democrats have used the abortion issue very effectively to motivate their base and to reach over and grab some independent and Republican women voters on that issue. But the fact of the matter is, Roe v. Wade, if it is reinstituted at the national level, is more restrictive than Washington's law. So the Democrats in Washington State who say, oh, we want Roe v. Wade back, they want evidently a tougher abortion law. And that's not true, but that's the nature of the campaign the Democrats have run on abortion since the Dobbs decision.
Okay, so let's move on to another race here. A highly contentious race down in southwestern Washington. It is District 3. Take a look. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, the Democrat incumbent, 52% of the vote. And then we've got Joe Kent at 48%, the Republican.
Still votes to come in. This one too close to call, just like last time. AJ Janaville live in Clark County, and he's been there talking to both camps tonight. AJ, what's the latest?
David, it's like deja vu from 2022. Now, this race is important for the state, but it also has an impact on who will control the House. That's something that we're looking at from across the country, what comes out of this race. Now, you have Gluesenkamp-Perez, who has been in that role, who's been the incumbent 2 years ago, beating Joe Kent, who's back to challenge her again. 2 years ago, it came down to less than a percentage point to get that victory. Right now, we're looking at a 4% difference. This race was so close that both of the people for this race, both candidates, were talking to their constituents via social media, trying to get as many people as they could to stay in line at the election offices. We were at those offices in the afternoon. The line stretched out the door. It stretched down the street. I spoke to one person who was at the end of the line when we interviewed them. They sent me a text a few hours ago. They told me they waited 3 hours to have their vote heard. Joe Kent was at the office in person talking to voters a short while ago. He was here in person speaking about the results. Earlier in the day, though, I got a chance to speak to Gluesenkamp-Perez about her feelings, essentially taking on a rematch from 2 years ago.
He is the same person that I ran against 2 years ago, maybe more time online since then, but my values haven't changed, and it's really, it's good to like have this voting record and say, look, I wasn't kidding about who I am. What I said I was going to do is what I did.
Kent took the stage about an hour ago at this point, speaking to the crowd, the majority of them here for his party. He got back from Vancouver, where the election offices are, about a 30-minute drive to where we are in Clark County. He said even though there's that 4% difference, he is staying confident. He's saying we're going to look at those ballots, and when you consider, again, 2 years ago, it came down to less than a percentage point. It is a close race. Another big thing to consider is this is an area that has seen some issues with those ballot box drop-off points. Just last week, there was a bomb set off at one of the ballot box drop-off points, destroying hundreds of votes. So that's a big thing to consider when 2 years ago, that race came down to just a few thousand votes. So a very close race, too close to call, something that we'll continue to keep an eye on, guys.
All right, AJ, thank you. Fox 13's Matthew Smith is in Studio B tracking some important national races. So, Matt, how's it looking for the balance of power nationally?
Well, David, when it comes to the Senate, we now have our answer. Republicans have taken down 51 seats when you consider who was already incumbents that were already holding on to their seats. Those in office, they had 38. They really only needed a handful of seats to flip. They've already done that. And there are still 7 races to be called. So we kind of got like the big board written up here. Reds are already going to GOP. Pinks are leaning that direction. Blues, obviously, and light blues. I think you get the point there. But I want to pull up the presidential and electoral college map. And the reason I do this for a second is look at where the blue wall is. So if you're watching along and you're looking at the national numbers in the corner of our screen, you see that Donald Trump is getting closer and closer to that 270 to win. You're going to hear a lot about the blue wall that Kamala Harris is going to try to put up with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in the coming hours, likely the coming days. So with that in mind, let's actually look at the state of play with those Senate races, because it is going to have an effect. Will coattails help out? Right now, you have the GOP winning, so this is leaning in that direction for Pennsylvania, which could be Senate number 52, but this is extremely close. Dave McCormick running with 49.6% of the vote, Bob Casey with 47.8%, and just for giggles here, let's take a look. You actually see that this is running closer than the presidential race in that state. So we can do the same thing with each one of these states as well. Take a look at Michigan next. Again, Mike Rogers, the Republican, winning with 50.8% of the vote. Alyssa Slotkin, the incumbent, who's been in Congress before, 46%. And we can start looking at these. This is how it's all going to go. The rest of the night and moving to the next couple days, if these states aren't called, you're going to be watching for where these votes are coming in from. Wayne County, that's where Detroit is. That is where we're going to see the biggest change in this. But bottom line, we now know officially that the Senate will be in favor of the Republicans moving forward. They always had more senators with them, but there was a number of independents that typically caucus with the Democrats. So you're moving in a direction with the potential for a Trump presidency. You're also moving the potential, or we've already seen the potential here, with Republicans to gain control of the Senate. The last big question is going to be balance of the U.S. House, and this is going to be very close, but we've seen a number of calls come in just in the last 20 or 30 minutes here. 92 races still to be called. Republicans hold the lead right now with 184, but there are a lot leaning left. Right now, if you were to look at a collision course for where we are seeing Trump head towards the presidency. We are seeing the Senate go Republican, and it's looking more and more like the House could go Democrat. But again, many, many races to be called, and David will be keeping an eye on this throughout the night. And again, like we've been talking about all week, the next couple of days.
All right, Matt, sounds good. Stay right there. We'll have more Fox 13 coverage. You decide 2024 after a quick break.
we're getting reaction now from the Let's Go Washington campaign and founder Brian Haywood, who is the man behind getting the 4 initiatives, the big initiatives, on the ballot.
Fox 13 Shira Matsuzawa is there live, and Shira, a tough battle for him tonight, and a lot of those initiatives are not doing so well vote-wise.
Yeah, that's right. You know, there was a noticeable difference in Brian Haywood and his tone earlier compared to when we talked to him 3 hours ago to just a short time ago. You know, earlier today he was very confident that all 4 initiatives would pass. Take a listen to what he had to say a short time ago.
Of course, I'm disappointed, right? I thought we had a real shot at, actually, I thought we had a shot at getting all 4. I really didn't understand, like I said before, the impact of $40 million lined up against us. But I'm not disheartened. I know we won 4 out of our 7. This journey started last year, really, not just this year. And no one thought we would get any of them through the legislature. So we've changed the law, and we've, I think, done things that'll save people's lives and save people money. And I'm not done. I'm not done.
In 2020, as you just heard him, he just said he's not done. He's not giving up. He also tells us that he's a fighter and he hates to lose. But he went on to say no one thought that they would get 3 through the legislature, and they did. So he says he's now going to figure out how he can go after a system that is, quote, arrogant and corrupt, and then come back. Now, here's a look now at the results coming in. Initiative 2066 is about regulating energy services and ensures access to natural gas. As of right now, 51% voting yes, 48% voting no. Initiative 2109 would repeal the state's capital gains tax. Right now, the majority voting no with 63%. Initiative 2124 would allow people to opt out of the state's long-term health care program. And right now, 55% of Washingtonians voting no. 2117 to repeal the state's Climate Commitment Act, 62% voting no to this initiative. And we caught up with the executive director of Climate Solutions, Greg Small, part of the Vote No group. Here's what he had to tell us.
Nationally tough. Washington State, kicking butt. So last November or December was the first time we heard about, oh, maybe we're going to have to deal with this ballot measure, which will turn out to be 2117. We're like, oh, my God. This is what we have to deal with? This is what we're going to do in 2024? And it turns out that that is indeed what we had to do in 2024.
And back out here live, you can see that there's still a crowd out here hanging out. They're watching as the rest of the election results come in, and they were just very excited moments ago with Pennsylvania's projections. Now, in the meantime, we'll keep an eye on what happens here, and we'll send it back to you.
All right, Shira, thank you. So of all of the initiatives, the one thing that I thought people might support was the initiative which is costing all of us 0.58% out of every $100 that you're making for the Washington CARES Act. But right now, people are supporting what's basically a tax.
Yeah, and so going off of what David said, he's talking about Initiative 2124. I'm going to give, an example before we bring in the political analysts here on this. So if somebody, for example, they're 40 years old, right? You're making $70,000 a year. You would be paying around $406 per year and about $10,500 during your lifetime into this Washington Cares Fund. And what this initiative was trying to do, Reuven, was to give people the option to opt out of paying into the Washington Cares Fund. And the people who supported the initiative were saying this was kind of a backhanded income tax in a way, that it was a sneaky way to get people's paycheck. I mean, would you disagree with that?
You know, the financing mechanism is absolutely challenging. There's no question that a payroll tax, because of our constitutional structure not allowing an income tax, it needs to be designed in a way that sort of functions as an actual payroll tax. But I think the real issue is that the people do actually know that long-term care is an absolutely serious challenge for their families. And the fact is that you have just a ton of families that really struggle with this. And just like Social Security and just like Medicare, this is a benefit that benefits families. So you contribute in over a period of time, and you get a benefit back. So there's a lot of argument about the mechanics of the money, and the issue of opting out would have brought the program down.
But the criticism is if you move away, you never get to use it, and if you do need to use it after 10 years, you only get $36,500, which, as we know, goes by in a drop in the bucket. Randy, did people get confused when they voted? Did they mean to vote yes when they voted no?
There is a certain element in our initiative process that when you're voting yes to repeal a law and you're thinking, well, no, I hate the law, so I want to vote no. If you do listen to the survey research, about a quarter of the voters were confused about how they were voting on the initiatives this fall. And this is one of those where, with a clear eye, they would have gone, this is a Ponzi scheme that the state would not allow a private insurer to run. It would be illegal for the private sector to do it. It's a ripoff, and it's a payoff to the Service Employee International Union that backs it and spent the money distorting in their advertising, telling people how great it was and how these nasty people were taking away a benefit that they don't have now and they'll never be able to get in large measure.
Well, the majority of the people of Washington actually think it's a public benefit for public good, and they get a lot of value for their families, so it looks like it's going to make.
And that's where the confusion comes in.
All right, we are expecting Donald Trump to speak tonight, and when that happens, we're going to take you live to the podium. We'll give you a look at it right now. There's the podium. We are not expecting Kamala Harris. In fact, we know Kamala Harris will not speak tonight, but Donald Trump likely to take the stage. We'll carry that for you live if he does, right here on Fox 13. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back. You may be seeing that Fox News is calling Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. We use the AP here at Fox 13, and the AP has not made that call yet, and other networks are also saying it is too early to call this one. So let's get to Matthew Smith. Matt, what are you seeing?
Well, we are seeing the trends that it is moving towards Donald Trump, but as you said, the AP is not yet calling this one, so you might be asking why. Let's take a closer look. Right now, at this point, 92% of the votes are in, so we are getting pretty late into the game here. Donald Trump is at 51.2% of the votes. That's 3.3 million votes that have already come in for him. Kamala Harris is at 47.8%. We've talked about this throughout the night. You always have to look at the votes that are uncounted at this point in time. And when it comes down to Pennsylvania, we truly are talking about the urban centers. Now, it's hard to see on your screen here, but we have some shaded in areas here that'll kind of walk you through. The main one that we're looking at right now is Philadelphia County. Philadelphia County really is just Philadelphia, the city proper. 89% of the votes here. So you're looking at another 11% of the votes. How are they breaking? To this point, almost 80% towards Kamala Harris. So you start looking at the numbers here and trying to figure out, are there enough left? Now, there's a few more large population, large suburban areas. Allegheny County is another. 94%. So again, we are getting very close. The AP hasn't decided to make a call on this yet, but we're getting closer because Allegheny County, again, breaking towards Kamala Harris 60% of the time. 6% left. And this is when every nerd out there that does analytics and statistics are trying to break down, okay, do we have enough votes left in that 8%? If we're seeing these large areas like in Allegheny County breaking 60% or a Philadelphia breaking almost 80% towards Kamala Harris, are there enough votes in there that'll shake loose and bring this a little bit closer? And actually, as we were talking there, we saw just a slight update there in vote total, but the percentages are still sticking with us at 51.2 to 47.8. But just so you know, there are still some votes at large that do break towards Donald Trump. Not a lot, but for instance, Bucks County still has about 28% of the vote left. Donald Trump taking in about 50.3. So that is why when you get this close, it is very hard to tell which way it's going to go. You see the Fox News decision desk is pulling this one towards Trump, and that would be a very, very big difference. Again, we are not calling this. We don't make the calls. We follow the Associated Press, really the gold standard for us here. Right now, Donald Trump is at 247. If you were to add Pennsylvania to him, remember the goal here is to get to 270. That would be 19 additional electoral college numbers there. You'd be pulling him up to 266, which at that point, it's a wide open field path to 270 for Trump. You could take Michigan, you could take Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. Any number of those, or just a single one of those, would push him past 270 if, in fact, Pennsylvania breaks his way. Again, we are so close, and this is how quickly this works. As I've been talking, we've gained 1%. So we're now down to just 7%. But look at these numbers. We have shifted once again. Donald Trump at 51% even. Kamala Harris now at 48% even. Still a 3% gap, but we've seen that actually shrink as far as Donald Trump's lead. So this is why we haven't made a call just yet, David.
Hold on, never mind. Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're just talking about what we have coming up for you. We're going to take a quick break and have much more right here on Election 2024. You decide right after this. to Fox 13 News, our special election coverage tonight. I'm David Rose.
And I'm Hannah Kim. We've been bringing you the top races of the night, and so far we've seen the Associated Press call the governor's election for Democrat Bob Ferguson. But another big race in our state is the race for Attorney General. Fox 13's Alejandra Guzman is at the Democratic Watch Party in Seattle. Allie.
Hannah, David, I can tell you that I'm probably one of the last few standing here. This night for the Dems is kind of wrapping up here, but not before several of them actually took the lead, and one of them being Nick Brown, who is actually could be Washington's next top lawyer. As you guys mentioned, he is stepping into this role, possibly filling in Ferguson's shoes. We know the AP is now calling that race, so he will be Washington's next governor. In the meantime, we're talking about Brown possibly being and overseeing nearly 2,000 employees, advising Ferguson himself and other state agencies. We saw him up here on stage, bringing his kids with him, being very excited. And I want to show you those actual results that we're getting in just now that have him leading at 56% against Pete Serrano, who's currently at 44%. And while he's not declaring victory, he's clear what his concerns are, including public safety. He's been determined to protect health care and access to abortion. Now, his priority is keeping Washingtonians safe. I did have the opportunity to speak with him and ask him exactly what his first 100 days would look like if he were to win this top lawyer spot. Take a listen.
The first 100 days will be about building a good team to make sure that Washington is prepared for whatever challenges that we face. So whether that's from a change in administration in D.C. or new challenges here, we're going to make sure that we build and develop the best law firm possible for the people of the state of Washington.
Now, he's got a lot to catch up on, especially a lot of those cases that Ferguson filed himself as the AG, one of those being the Kroger and Albertsons merger. He says he's ready to step in and catch up because now we're hearing that the AP has actually called this election. So now we know that Brown will officially be Washington's next top lawyer. Again, he wants to thank everyone at the end of the night for coming out and doing their civic duty, especially those who supported him throughout the last 15 months during his campaign. That's the very latest. Back to you.
All right, Allie, thank you. Now let's go to Fox 13's Frankie Thompson. She's at the Republican Party in Bellevue tonight. So, Frankie, I see you quite a crowd still there.
Yeah, it's still a very lively crowd here at the Hyatt in Bellevue. People are already talking about an after party. They want to go to the next spot to celebrate the numbers that are continuing to roll in for the presidential race. Now, we know that Dave Reichert spoke a little bit earlier. We heard him say he is not conceding in the race for Washington's governor. But these folks here are really, really excited about what is developing across the nation when it comes to other national elections, including the race for presidency. But still, they congratulated Dave Reichert on his campaign for governor as the Republican candidate. They thanked him for what he stood for, public safety, standing against domestic violence, supporting our public schools. So they are thanking him for his candidacy. Earlier today, he told his voters that he is not going to concede until every vote counted. While he was addressing folks in the crowd, I got to ask him a couple questions. Why he said he was not going to concede. I also asked him about his robust plan to address crime and public safety in our state. Let's take a listen.
Because every vote counts. So we're not going to give up. We're not going to concede until every vote has been counted. And I think that's just fair to people who participate in the voting process to be patient enough to have all the votes counted. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm going to find a way to have an influence here in this state. There's a lot of people in here that are engaged in a lot of activities specifically addressed to public safety, homelessness, the economy, education. And so we're going to engage with those folks, but we'll wait to see what the final numbers are.
As you just heard him, he is still going to wait to see what the final numbers say. But should he not come through with this election, even though it has been called for the governor race in Washington, Reichert says that he still wants to be involved. He still wants to be engaged, connected, and working to support those issues that he stood so firmly on throughout his entire campaign, actively campaigning on those key issues, the top one being public safety. Now, he was telling us as Washingtonians, he said if he's not elected as governor, we still need to do our part holding government accountable when it comes to addressing crime in our state, when it comes to the challenges our public schools are facing, when it comes to tax challenges in Washington, he says that we can still use our voice, even if he's not in office, to make a change here in Washington. As far as change here, it doesn't look like the party's going to wrap up anytime soon. As the numbers continue rolling in for the presidency, it just gets loud every single time we get new numbers in that race. So it looks like we're going to stick around a little bit longer to see what else develops, some more cheers and applause that we might possibly hear as the race for U.S. president continues. For now, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Frankie, thank you. And Fox 13 is staying on top of developing news as results pour in. People are reacting. Earlier tonight, Seattle police arrested 5 people for property damage.
Fox 13's Jennifer Dowling is there. So, Jennifer, what happened?
Well, there was a group of about 30 to 50 people that were marching through the streets earlier in the evening, and they were in the Capitol Hill area, around the area of Pike and 11th and 12th and even 13th. Then they made their way to Cal Anderson Park here, and Seattle police say that they did leave some what they described as property damage behind. There was some graffiti here at the fountain, and then at a couple other places we noted in the park, and then also in the Capitol Hill area near Pike Street and Pine. So police say that they did arrest 5 people, all for property damage in this case, as they had been spray painting, and then we heard also that they were dragging some scooters into the streets. So I asked police if they could give me more detail. They said not at this time. Social media posts showed them on Broadway and in the area of Pike and 11th a few hours ago. So we don't know exactly the affiliation the group had. Seattle police posted images that showed there was some graffiti left behind in other areas as well in this part of the park. SPD said it made 5 arrests again, and then the group was disbanded. They kind of just filtered out. And so we'll bring you any updates that we learn here and at fox13seattle.com. For now, reporting live here in Seattle, Jennifer Dowling, Fox 13 News.
All right, Jen, thank you. And we are expecting to hear from Donald Trump tonight. Here's a live look, in fact, at the podium where we're expecting him to come and give a speech. We'll carry that for you live. If he does, we'll be right back. Welcome back to our coverage. You Decide 2024. It's fascinating to see how the balance of power shakes out on these huge election nights. And nowhere bigger than right here in our own state is the race for the 3rd Congressional District that could affect that national balance of power in Congress. So let's start with our political consultants and talk about that tonight. Reuven, as we look at that race with Joe Kent and Marie Gluesenkamp, where is that race going to go, and how important is it to the national struggle for balance of power?
This race could not be more important if we tried. We are at the absolute center with the United States House of Representatives partisan control on the table. There's no question that this has been top to bottom in, every media source in the world understanding that this is the ultimate issue is, are the Democrats going to control the House of Representatives when the Republicans have taken over the U.S. Senate? And the 3rd congressional race, as we know, is absolutely critical to that.
Yeah, look at the numbers right there. That is a nail biter. If you are Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, you are not going to sleep, with you're not comfortable, right, at 52% being the incumbent. So, Randy, when you're looking at the numbers, were you able to kind of look at what are the outstanding numbers, and can Joe Kent come back from this?
Undoubtedly, he can come back from this. I mean, it's a 12,000 vote margin, and about perhaps 60% of the total vote has been counted so far. And so you've got several 100,000 votes that are out there that can still tip this race. And that's what happened 2 years ago when ultimately Gluesenkamp Perez won by 2,700 votes. I mean, it went back and forth, and she pulled out at the end. But what's really interesting is up and down the West Coast is going to decide which party controls Congress. Right now, the Republicans have a 4-seat advantage. There are a dozen seats on the West Coast that are up for grabs. The Washington 3rd is one of them. The Alaska open seat, at-large seat, is one of them. There's 2 races in Oregon, and then there's 8 races down in California. That will determine which party controls. And California takes the longest to count of any state in the country. And Alaska has a ranked choice voting system that won't even kick in for another week if that race is close enough. So you're going to be in a situation where the Democrats need to have a position of power in Washington, D.C. Right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be in the White House, and it's not going to be in the Senate. It's going to have to be in the U.S. House, and they're going to be watching the West Coast.
And speaking of the U.S. House, another race that we're looking at is the 4th Congressional District. This is between Dan Newhouse, the longtime incumbent, Jared Sessler, a newcomer coming in. And Jared Sessler has Mr. Trump's support. So looking at how Trump is performing, do you feel like that is going to help Sessler?
Well, it has to date. I mean, Jared Sessler's at 48% right now. And frankly, he's not qualified to be in Congress. And so Dan Newhouse is a strong conservative who has served that district well. The only thing that Mr. Sessler has going for him is the Trump endorsement, and that's got him in a position that Dan Newhouse has seen in the past, which is running against a fellow Republican and being seen as the one that isn't conservative enough. So this is another one that's going to go down for another week until we see how those last votes come in.
Yeah, only 57% of the votes have been tallied so far. So as Randy said, a lot coming in. Reuven, are we sending any new faces to Congress this year?
We are. Out in Spokane, we have Michael Baumgartner is going to be a new member of Congress from that district, and replacing Representative Kathleen McMorris Rogers, succeeding her after so many years of her service. And then Emily Randall down in the 6th District, who is succeeding former Representative Derek Kilmer. So that's just a substantive change, because obviously our congressional delegation has to work together. We have a long history of working together on issues of hydropower and so many other issues. So we're excited to have a really strong congressional team.
But are you feeling a little nervous as a Democrat now? I know statewide things are going well for the Democrats. On a national level, not going so well.
Yeah, control of the U.S. House of Representatives by the Democrats is absolutely paramount. There's no question about it. And not only is it critical for Washington State to have a good congressional team, we have to have the whole West Coast be strong, because we have a lot of policy alignments with California and Oregon and Alaska, with a lot of issues around fishing and the maritime industry, the aviation industry, with us as the home of Boeing. So all these issues are incredibly important to the West Coast.
All right, Reuven, we've got some breaking news for you before we go to the break. Fox News is now calling the presidential race for Donald Trump. The Associated Press is not yet calling this race, and no other networks are calling it at this time, but Fox News is saying Donald Trump will be be the next president. We're expecting to hear from him speaking live. We'll carry that speech live when it happens, and we'll be back right after this break.
Welcome back in. Seattle City Council results tonight. Take a look. This is for position 8, the seat that Tanya Wu was appointed to. And as you can see right there, Tanya Wu is way behind her challenger, Alexis Mercedes Rink, with 57% of the vote. Tanya Wu at 42%. This race has not been called by the AP yet, but we did hear from Tanya Wu not too long ago, and she essentially has conceded the race. She does not believe that she can come back from this, so it looks as though Alexis Mercedes Rink will be the at-large council member, a new face to the Seattle City Council. But take a listen to what was said earlier.
Our message about building a Seattle that works for all of us really has resonated. A Seattle that works for all of us means that a city is affordable, it's a city that is safe for everybody, and it's a city that's also investing for our future. When we're talking about transit infrastructure, when we're talking about the built environment of our city, and also thinking about climate resilience. And we've championed also a strong message also on what community safety looks like. Building a public safety system that has a quick response and the right response is something that has really resonated with folks across the city.
And so you see Tanya Wu there is a different environment in her camp. Tanya Wu was a moderate Democrat, and Alexis Mercedes Rink more on the far left, and clearly Seattle voters, they have chosen who they wanted. Tanya Wu was actually appointed to the position 8 after council member Teresa Mosqueda, who was chosen by voters to replace King County Councilmember Joe McDermott, stepped down to take that role. They had that opening, so council members came together, voted her into that position. She made some, big votes while she was there for those several months. She thanked supporters at her headquarters earlier this evening. Take a listen.
I don't know the numbers, but we are not in the lead. And so I want to thank everybody for supporting me in the campaign. I'm really I'm really proud of everybody and your support, and we're going to be resilient and strong and continue the work that we're doing and fighting for our communities.
All right, there you have it. That Position 8 of Seattle City Council. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, welcome back in. For the last time, we want to check in with our analysts for their final thoughts on this big night. Reuven, I want to start with you.
You know, Washington State has a great quality of life, and the people of this state really care about the outdoors. They care about, we have a great high-tech community. We are the home of Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, Costco, Boeing, the Gates Foundation. You know, we just have a great quality of life. People care about the outdoors, and I think you're seeing in these election results at the state level, people want to make sure that we maintain that. So I think there's good results at the state level. You know, obviously when you shift to the national level, for Democrats, a great deal of uncertainty and a great deal of anxiety. Losing the U.S. Senate to the Republicans makes the U.S. House of Representatives even more important. So the congressional race down in the 3rd district here in Washington matters a lot. It's a national player, a national factor. But we also, you know, have a reality check. If Donald Trump goes to the White House again, and I think there's a lot of opposition in our state. The Republican brand is really damaged in our state, and the Democratic brand, I think, has got to struggle to figure out how to play in the national arena. So we're at a unique time. We have a great quality of life in our state, but I think people are really struggling to figure out how we relate to the national government if it's going to be divided this way.
Yeah. Former Senator Reuven Carlisle, thank you for joining us tonight to give us your perspective. Randy, he mentioned the Republicans and having a hard time. There is no stronger candidate, or hasn't been in a long time, than Dave Reichert for the Republicans. What do the Republicans in our state need to do to get a state office?
Well, first, I'm sure they're looking wistfully across the country at Republican successes and wondering why it didn't make it all the way to the West Coast. And I think it comes down to a couple of key reasons. One, resources. I mean, Washington Republicans are getting massively outspent by the Democratic Party and have been for the last 20 years in this state. And that's because Democrat-rich donors have decided that they value investments in state government and in state politics in a way that Republican and corporate donors do not. And that has manifested itself this year in margins that we have not seen, 5 and 10 to 1 in these major races where the Democrat side has had an advantage. The second one is we've got to not have Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. I mean, while that might work in the rest of the country, and if he returns to the White House, there will be a lot of people happy about that. It doesn't work in Washington State. And it hasn't worked in the last three election cycles. And it is easy for Democrats to demagogue on the Trump issue and motivate their base and really turn Republican voters and independent voters who are soft away from the Republican candidates. And then finally, we need great candidates. I mean, you've got to have good candidates stand up there and get involved early. We had candidates get involved like Dave Reichert this time. Dave got in too late into the race. He needed to be in it earlier. He needed to be in it as soon as Ferguson was in it, frankly, 18 months ago. Because that's the only way that you can compete in Washington State as a Republican is if you have the ground game in place, you have the resources in place, and you have the time to put together a campaign and start to overcome some of those issues that Reuven talks about, the social issues or some of the other cutting-edge issues that Democrats have used very successfully for the last 20 years to run the same campaign, which is Republicans are extreme. We are not. We're not going to tell you what we're going to do, but we're not extreme. And that's worked for them. And frankly, until the Republicans can stop them and post a victory, why would the Democrats run any other kind of campaign?
All right, Randy, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for being with us tonight. The News at 11 starts now.
Now at the top of the 11, Fox News has called the presidential race for Donald Trump. The Associated Press has not called that race, so we have not either. We use the Associated Press. And right now, this is a look at the electoral count. It is 270 to win it. And as you can see, Donald Trump there, 248, with Kamala Harris sitting at 214. We know that Harris will not speak tonight. Meanwhile, we are still waiting for Donald Trump to take the stage to speak. So whenever that happens, we will absolutely take you there.
So let's turn now to our race for governor. The Associated Press has called the race for Democrat Bob Ferguson. Fox 13's Lauren Donovan live all night at Democrat headquarters in Seattle, where Ferguson gave a rousing acceptance speech tonight. Lauren, that place was packed. Looks like the Democrats all went home, though, to get a good night's sleep, I guess.
Yeah, let me tell you, this place is a graveyard of what it once was. They've stopped playing the election results on the screens behind me. Everyone is packed up, gone home. They turned on the lights, signaling this is over and done with. It was a big night for the Democrats here in Washington State, and a huge celebration on the stage here behind me. You know, the AP called the race for Attorney General, the governor's race, Bob Ferguson. That was at 8 o'clock, and then half an hour later, all these folks came up on the stage, kicked off with Senator Patty Murray, introing everybody, getting all these folks so excited that we're in here, packed tight. Bob Ferguson spoke, but before he spoke, we heard from Congresswoman Kim Schreier, representing Washington's 8th District. Right now, her race has not been called yet. She's got about an 8% lead over her Republican opponent, and she might be feeling confident here locally, but like many other Democrats I spoke to tonight, there's a lot of uneasiness about what's going on the national stage.
Well, I think we're all anxious about the presidential race, and I am still holding out hope that when all the ballots are counted, we will have a President Harris.
And 4 hours ago, I spoke with another Congresswoman, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal from Washington's 7th, and she was really excited back then, had a lot of energy. She was saying, hey, I think the women are going to turn this out and push for Harris, and there's going to be a victory there. She also seemed fairly confident that the House would go blue, the House that she's planning to return to. I mean, she swept her opponent. It was, I'm looking at the numbers right here, 85% to 15%. But, you know, I'd like to catch up with her now. Obviously, everybody's gone, but are the folks who were feeling so hot earlier in the night still feeling that way as these new results are coming in? That's all for now, as they've clearly wrapped things up here at Democrat HQ. We'll send it back to you.
Lauren, thank you so much. And let's go now to Fox 13's Frankie Thompson tracking the governor's race at the Republican Watch Party in Bellevue. Frankie.
Yes, the Bellevue party here for the GOP, still very active. A lot of people just won't go home. They are full of excitement. As Hannah, you were saying earlier, Fox News has called the election for U.S. president, but the Associated Press has not. We follow those results, but the folks here have already claimed former President Trump as their newly elected president. They're very excited. There's a lot of energy here. The party continues here. They are still very proud of their candidate, their Republican candidate, Dave Reichert, running his campaign for Washington governor. You know, the state has not had a Republican governor since the 80s. The supporters we spoke to say they are very proud of the campaign that he ran, but ultimately it came up short this time. They still support all of his principles, the issues that he campaigned on for several months. We got a chance to speak with Dave Reichert on some of those issues as well. He says he's not going to concede in this race for governor until every single vote is counted. I also had a chance to speak with him when he was meeting and greeting with folks, his voters in the crowd. I had an opportunity to ask him about his public safety plan when it comes to addressing crime in the area, in the region, in our state. Let's hear both of his answers right now.
Because every vote counts. So we're not going to give up. We're not going to concede until every vote has been counted. And I think that's just fair to people who participate in the voting process to be patient enough to have all the votes counted. I think is the right thing to do. I'm going to find a way to have an influence here in this state. There's a lot of people in here that are engaged in a lot of activities specifically addressed to public safety, homelessness, the economy, education, and so we're going to engage with those folks, but we'll wait and see what the final numbers are.
And some of the other Republican candidates, their campaigns not going as planned in this election cycle, but we did get a chance to hear from some of them. Current mayor of Pasco and Republican candidate for Attorney General Pete Serrano. He gave statement earlier this evening, as well as we heard from Dr. Raul Garcia. He is running for U.S. Senate. He also gave statement to the crowd today, to his voters, both of them thanking everyone for what they've done throughout the campaign, the support they've received, the votes that mattered in this election. It came up short for our Republican candidates in this election cycle, but as you heard, Dave Reichert said he's not giving up just yet. He wants every single vote counted. As far as these folks here, they're trying to find an after party. They're still waiting for more to come from the presidential race. I guess they're waiting on the Associated Press results just like we are. But as far as this crowd here tonight at the Hyatt in Bellevue, they are cheering for the presumably presidential-elect former President Donald Trump. We're going to stick around here to get some last bit of reaction before we wrap it up here. We'll send it back to you in the studio for now.
All right, Frankie, thank you. And we're also tracking the race for Public Lands Commissioner and Fox 13's Alejandro Guzman in Seattle. Allie, you spoke with candidate Dave Upthegrove, and he seems like he's feeling pretty good tonight.
He is. I mean, he gave quite the speech earlier today. This has been a race that has given us lots to talk about. Let's back up and go a little bit back to the primaries, where we saw a very crowded ballot. And even then, we saw it was neck to neck between Dave Upthegrove and Sue Peterson, those slim margins triggering a hand recount. At the end of the day, though, he did come out on top. Shifting gears to what we saw here tonight, he was highly energized. And I want to point out, he even went on stage and thanked his husband, Chad. We're talking about Dave Upthegrove, because he says he would be the first openly gay man to be elected to the state executive. So he was very proud if indeed he does win tonight. Now, he says at the national level, though, Democrats need to be a little hopeful. That was the key word tonight, even for this state race. Take a listen.
The race for Commissioner of Public Lands in the primary was decided by 49 votes, but I'm hopeful tonight that Washington voters will embrace the evergreen state's values of conservation and elect me in a landslide.
Now let's go straight to those results and show you exactly what we're talking about, because as he's talking about, he wanted to win with a landslide. At least that's what he told me earlier. But those early results show Up the Grove leading 53% against Jamie Herrera Butler, who's currently at 47%. Again, he's not claiming a victory here, but he says that should he win, he's ready to step in and, of course, manage those nearly 6 million acres of Washington lands. Here's what he had to say about that.
I'm excited to manage these state lands in the public interest for all the people of the state of Washington, not just for industry. And that means protecting our clean air, clean water, and habitat, improving wildfire prevention response, and the old Boy Scout in me wants to increase the recreational opportunities people have on our state lands.
I can't stress it enough. This is going to be one tough, big job for anyone who does become the victor. We're talking about Butler or Up the Grove here. He's hopeful, Up the Grove, to nurture rural communities and create more jobs. So there's a lot to tackle here. Again, this race is still too early to call. So this is one we're going to keeping an eye on for you. That's very latest. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Turning now to District 3, the race between Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Joe Kent down in Vancouver. So far, here are the results. The race too close to call by the Associated Press. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez has 52%. She's the incumbent, facing Joe Kent, 48%. These two ran against each other last time. It's a tight race, and it's been that way all night. So A.J. Janavel is there covering both campaigns. Let's go out to him.
This is a race that has big implications for the state, but also the entire country, because the winner of this race could help sway who has the power in the House. Now, right now, those results are starting to come in. We're seeing that there's a 4% difference with Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, the incumbent, in the lead. Joe Kent, the challenger, down just like 2 years ago. This is a rematch from the 2020 election. That race came down to less than a percentage point. This race is so close that both candidates were speaking online through social media to make sure that people waiting in line at the election offices in Vancouver would stay in line and make sure that those votes got in. In fact, Joe Kent, whose party we're at here in Clark County, was 30 minutes away for the majority of this party, speaking to voters who were in line. I got a chance to speak to Gluesenkamp-Perez a little bit earlier in the day about essentially what is a rematch.
He is the same person that I ran against 2 years ago, maybe more time online since then, but my values haven't changed, and it's really, it's good to have this voting record and say, look, I wasn't kidding about who I am. What I said I was going to do is what I did.
When Kent finally did make it to his party, he said that he remains confident to the people here despite those early results that show him down 4%.
There's, I believe, as I'm doing the back of the envelope math, there's probably somewhere between 70 and 90,000 votes out there still, depending on what the turnout is. So we'll see. We're down by about 4% right now, so don't have too much fun tonight. We have to cure ballots tomorrow.
Another big thing to consider with this close race is this is the county that experienced an attack on a ballot drop box where someone was able to destroy hundreds of ballots through a bomb. So again, this is a close race. This is something that we'll continue to keep an eye on, but for now, we'll send it back to you.
AJ, thank you. And we are still waiting for Donald Trump to take the podium tonight, and we will bring it to you right here live. And you see the podium right there. We'll be right back after a quick break. All right, this election, voters were deciding on 4 statewide ballot measures.
Fox 13 Shira Matsuzawa at the watch party in favor of those measures tonight in Kirkland. Shira.
Yeah, you know, there was a noticeable difference, though, when we talked to Brian Haywood, the founder of Let's Go Washington, earlier this afternoon compared to just a short time ago, since those results have been pouring in. Take a listen now, though, because earlier today, he was positive and confident that all 4 initiatives would pass. Take a listen.
Of course, I'm disappointed, right? I thought we had a real shot at, actually, I thought we had a shot at getting all 4. I really didn't understand, like I said before, the impact of $40 million lined up against us. But I'm not disheartened. I know we won 4 out of our 7. This journey started last year, really, not just this year. And no one thought we would get any of them through the legislature. So we've changed the law, and we've, I think, done things that'll save people's lives and save people money. And I'm not done. I'm not done.
This time, I think it will be one.
As you just heard, he says he's not giving up. He also went on to say that he's going to figure out how we can go, or how he can go after the system that is, quote, arrogant and corrupt, and then come right back. And here's a look now at those results coming in. Initiative 2066 is about regulating energy services and ensures access to natural gas. As of right now, 51% voting yes, 48% voting no. Initiative 2124 would allow people to opt out of the state's long-term health care program. 55% of Washingtonians voting no so far. And 2117 to repeal the state's Climate Commitment Act. 61% voting no to this initiative. And Initiative 2109 would repeal the state's capital gains tax. Right now, the majority voting no with 63%. And we caught up with the No on I-2109 campaign. Here's what they had to say.
We are feeling wonderful. It's very clear that Washingtonians are rejecting Brian Haywood's attempt to give a tax break to the very, very wealthy, especially at the expense of kids and families. So we're feeling really strong, seeing strong support in every single county across the state.
And back here at Live, you can see that there are still some people out here watching as those election results still pour in, including Brian Haywood himself. In Kirkland, Shira Matsuzawa, Fox 13 News. I'll send it back to you.
Sure, thank you. We can tell you they are testing the microphone where Donald Trump is at Mar-a-Lago. We are expecting him to speak. We're going to carry it for you live as he comes to the podium. We'll be right back. tonight, Fox News has called the presidential election for Donald Trump. The Associated Press has not called the election yet. Let's go to Matthew Smith. So, Matt, why do you think the AP not calling it for the president yet for Trump?
Well, any number of reasons. They are going over the numbers, I'm sure, at this point in time, but I'll tell you, they are probably getting much closer. The two states that have been called by the Fox decision desk that we have not seen called by the AP yet are Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Remember earlier I was talking about those uncounted votes? Well, look at right here. Philadelphia, Kamala Harris is getting 79% of the vote there, but we are now at 96% of the vote counted. So she would have to continue to turn up more votes in that place, and we're just not seeing it. That means Pennsylvania probably gets called soon by the AP as well. Wisconsin, similar situation. We looked for the uncounteds. Where are they at? Milwaukee. Yeah, they're breaking, but only 65% to Kamala Harris, which at this point, she's trailing by 3%. You're going to see this gap continue to widen. It's just not looking good for the vice president at this point in time. Former President Trump looking better and better at this point in time.
All right, Matthew, thank you. And stay with us. We'll have a final look at your forecast straight ahead.